Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay, but that's what happens when you lock everything in your car. The public safety meeting is now called to order. Today is Monday, November the 13th. We begin to acknowledge that the land on which we gather, that is currently known as the city of West Hollywood, is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and Gabrielino Kritz people. Pledge of Allegiance, and who said they were going to lead the pledge this evening? Thank you, Commissioner. Please, everyone stand and put your hand over your heart.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commission Secretary, may I please get a roll call?
Commissioner Blau?
Aye.
Commissioner Ramian?
Present.
Commissioner Freiberg?
Here.
Commissioner Harrison?
Here.
Commissioner Nickel?
Here.
Vice Chair Saltzman?
Here.
Chair Hallman?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Approval of the agenda. Item 4 is the approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting, November 13th. Any changes? Do I have a motion to approve?
Move we approve the agenda.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Great, thank you. Can I get another roll call, Commissioner Secretary?
Commissioner Blau?
Aye.
Commissioner Ramian?
Present.
Commissioner Freiberg?
Aye.
Commissioner Harrison?
Aye.
Commissioner Nickel?
Aye.
Vice Chair Saltzman?
Aye.
Chair Hallman?
Aye.
The agenda is approved.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Secretary. Next item, item 5, is the agenda, or the approval of the agenda, or the minutes, rather, from our last meeting on October 9th. Are there any changes, or do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
And do we? Great, thank you. And another roll call, Commissioner Secretary?
Commissioner Blau?
Aye.
Commissioner Ramian?
Aye.
Commissioner Freiberg?
Aye, but I wasn't here.
Commissioner Harrison?
Aye.
Commissioner Nickel?
Aye.
Vice Chair Saltzman?
Aye.
Chair Hallman?
Aye.
The minutes are approved.
Great, thank you. Item 7 on our agenda, or item 6 rather, is public comments. Commission Secretary, do we have any public comments in chambers?
Yes, we have one public comment in chambers. Rick Watts, if you want to approach the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. I guess kind of the item that I probably it would what I've got to say is would best fit under would be mitigation of the city's local hazard, and specifically regarding abandoned properties. Specifically, the one that I'm thinking of is at 1280 North Sweetser Avenue. I've spoken with Director of Public Safety, Danny Rivas, several times about this, and as well as to Council on previous public comment. And Danny has done his level best to help with this property, but the city is engaged in litigation, and the property has been finally assigned to a receiver, but the hazards surrounding the property, as far as an extreme fire hazard as well as a public nuisance, remain. And so I'm going to ask you all to please recommend to Council that all assistance possible be given to Danny in pushing to get this this property put to bed as far as the hazards. It is an abandoned house at 1280 North Sweetser Avenue that has been vacant for years, and the property owner lives overseas, is not taking care of the property. He's already lost the lawsuit, but there are dead trees, dead brush. There have already been at least 2 fires that I'm aware of that have been associated with the property, one of which was an arson, and lots of homeless and other riffraff that have gone in and out of the building, either camping out or engaging in illegal activity, not to mention the trespassing part of it over the years, as recently as about 2 weeks ago, back at the end of October, and it goes on. The property has frequently been unsecured, and although the property owner was under order to keep the place under 24-hour guard, that has not happened for months. The owner has long since burned through the $150,000 bond that he was forced to post. And so I'm going to ask that you recommend to council to provide Danny with the resources for the city to post a guard and to clean up the property until the receiver can do, and the court can make happen what needs to happen to cure this public nuisance, this extreme fire hazard, and notice what happened down and under the freeway the other day, that has caused an enormous amount of damage and inconvenience and cost to the public infrastructure. And this could just as easily have happened with a wildfire running down to Santa Monica Boulevard if that caught fire in the middle of Santa Ana winds in the middle of the night. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Secretary, any additional comments in chambers?
We don't have any additional comments in chambers.
And do we have any comments on Zoom?
We have no Zoom comments.
Okay, great, thank you. So moving on the agenda, item 7A, the Los Angeles County Fire Department will now provide us with a monthly report for October 2023. Good evening, gentlemen.
All right. Well, good evening, and this is Battalion Chief Jeff Swingle. He's the C-Shift Battalion Commander here in West Hollywood, so I want to give him some exposure, how awesome you guys are. With October, just wanted to say thank you for your support and everything we did, and you've done for us. We'll talk about Carnival here shortly, but just by looking at what we saw in October, total of 15 fires. 2 of those were structure fires, one at the 7300 block of Santa Monica Boulevard and one structure fire at the 1000 block of Martel. Both very small in nature. Your firefighters took quick action. They're both related to electrical issues and malfunction within the home. However, the rest of the 13 we had were rubbish fires or outdoor type fires. And to answer Commissioner Nichols' request based upon the hotspot at Fairfax and Fountain, so yes, that is a hotspot for us at this point in time. So over the course of the close to 4 years I've been here now, it seems like it's a moving target with outdoor fires. So there's a significant amount of them in West Hollywood, but this happens to be the hot spot right now for where your firefighters are going with these outdoor fires in nature. So as I've talked before, all fires start out small. All of them have different set of challenges and pose vulnerabilities to wherever they start. And so we're always looking at different areas of where we can have a heightened awareness for these. So your firefighters are out 20 to 22 times a day on medical responses, plus doing their fire prevention and everything else. So our presence in the neighborhood. So we have quick looks at stuff, and they do go by to be proactive, not being on a response, but just knowing the area. So that hopefully is a deterrent and can lead to quick action. So I just wanted to bring that up, and we can, if we have any follow-up on that, Commissioner Nichol, we can talk about that. As far as our medical runs, we 453 patients we've seen. 103 were needed advanced life support, 215 of basic life support. We transported 318 patients, and just looking at some categories just for some perspective on the patients that we do see, which it could be anything. However, we had 65 and says categorized as major injuries. So not all major injuries are these major type of injuries. They could be some sort of a trauma to be categorized as a major injury. So major injury is pretty wide range of what major can be, but this major is going to need some sort of advanced life support intervention. So the other high statistical components we saw was person sick and unconscious, which is routine for the area for West Hollywood. We had 0 hazmat calls. We had 3 hazardous condition calls. We had 23 service calls. And with our good intent calls, 179. And I believe I brought this up last time, is I like good intent calls. And once again, I see that everybody's here now. So the reason I like good intent call, that means people are being observant and they're calling 911 for us to go and assess the situation. So that is what I like to see, so your firefighters can evaluate what the necessary or appropriate response or intervention needs to be. Talking to Carnival, it was a success for us. We're in unified command with our West Hollywood Sheriff's Department, and we have a great working relationship as well, as you know, with them. And just some highlights on that. We had a total of 45 responses that your firefighters handled. We had 6 of those that were outside the footprint of Carnival and 39 that were in the footprint of Carnival. And we transported 3 patients to Cedars, and with that, the med tent is a huge success to give that assessment of what is sick, not sick, critical, not critical. So that is a huge benefit, so we can have resources available to meet a higher need for medical calls. And within the med tent, we also had quite a people that decided to not be transported to the hospital. There is against medical advice, so we suggested they went. We had quite a few patients that known, so they went home with a friend. We even had some that, which we call eloped, meaning they walked away, and or somebody that was taken by another person that was there. And with that, just going into the holidays, just slow down. Safe practice in the home when cooking. We start getting an uptake in unattended cooking type of emergencies, smoke coming from buildings. People set the oven, have a lapse in judgment, maybe you could say. They go away, they think it's going to be quick. You come back, we have food on the stove or something. So just be mindful of your time management when people are cooking within the home so it doesn't lead to something else. And last but not least is we had daylight savings, and that's a good time to swap out your batteries and your smoke detectors. Daylight savings is a good time. Any questions for us?
Commissioners, any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good evening, and just one quick question. You said within the footprint of Carnival, the fire department had 39 patients. Do you know what those 39 calls were for? Can you break that down off the top?
No, I can't. I know that 911 call was generated, and within Carnival, we didn't use fire station 7s and 8s resources. We had a component that just focused on that. So it could have been that we witnessed somebody flagged us down, so we made contact with that many patients, but most of them were that they partied a little too hard. Yeah, we didn't have any significant trauma patients or anything like that that was notable.
Commissioners, any other questions? Let's go ahead, Commissioner Ball.
Thank you. Around the topic of ensuring that our homes are safe right now, do you have any good references that renters or even kind of small business or small landlords might have to reference to ensure that their buildings are up to fire code standard? As an example, I live in an apartment building, and I'm semi-familiar with some fire codes, and I noticed that my building was out of fire code by having, lit marked egress doors locked and unable to go through. I actually ended up getting trapped and I couldn't get out. But around that line, is there other references that kind of maybe not just even around like fire exits, but changing smoke alarms or any other kinds of references that you can point to help out just the community to maintain safety?
So any of the clarification you may need on the fire code, which is very complex. Fire prevention or your jurisdictional station can go out and do those type of walkthroughs. So it is our job, if we're on a response and we're at a building, and if we see something, we get a hold of the property management company, get a hold of the building owner or the tenant to get that information, because there's things that need to be addressed. So when you say blocked exits or no panic hardware, that is something that we need to address. And so 2 different folds for that. You can contact your jurisdictional station and they'll go out there. You can call the battalion chief and he'll make sure that somebody goes out there. Or we can call fire prevention. We can talk to Danny, because he knows how to get a hold of us. And we can go, and I talk to Danny quite a bit when we have those type of issues, and we go out and we will see what is important for the life safety mission and to be in compliance with the fire code. That's a great question. So plenty of good resources out there, but start with your jurisdictional fire station. Or if you need to get a hold of Danny, they can get a hold of us to address any of those issues.
Okay, and so like anyone in the public, how would they get in contact with the jurisdictional fire department?
They can
in a
Google
non-emergency standpoint.
They can call the fire station direct. They can stop by.
Okay.
So we know that the city of West Hollywood is very community based and oriented. They all know Fire Station 7, Fire Station 8, they see us all the time, so they can go in and say, I have a concern,
Okay.
and we'll go look at it.
Great.
That's what we do. And if it's something that's outside of what the jurisdictional station can do, that's when our fire prevention division gets in. It's when the jurisdictional battalion chief steps in, or I step in, or even Danny.
And Commissioner Blau, I'll also just mention that our code enforcement staff do perform habitability type of inspections. That is a huge purview of theirs. And so the community can certainly contact our code enforcement division. That number is available in their contact information on the city's website. And then you can go to the search engine, just type in code enforcement. It has the hours of operation, but I'll just mention it here. So 323-848-6516 is the code enforcement message line. Folks can also contact code enforcement at CODE at weho.org. And then in addition to that, we do have in a city's official app that folks can go on the city's website, right, and they can download on their smartphone. And they can submit a request that way as well. And so what Assistant Chief Smith had mentioned, our code enforcement staff, and then sometimes we'll bring in even our building inspection staff, as well as fire prevention. You know, if there are habitability issues, ingress, egress, if they're wanting to, get clarification on something, they certainly will work very closely with the local fire station.
Great. Okay, that's super helpful. I didn't know our code enforcement would be able to do that as well. So
Yeah,
that's
a
a
great
good resource. So thank you.
Team effort. Believe me, we do a lot together. So it's a really good working relationship.
Great. Thank you.
You bet.
Commissioner Nickel.
Thank you, Chair. Assistant Fire Chief Smith, good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
Battalion Chief, thanks for joining us. Thank you for following up on the two that stuck out to me were the rubbish fires that both happened the same day on the 7th of October there at Fountain and Fairfax. And the reason why I brought it up is because I know that there's an abandoned building there. It's on the northwest corner. And when I did a ride-along months ago with Station 7, they were called out. They had been called out repeatedly. So it was there again, yes? The same issue.
Correct. And once again, as you know, when we're out, we will target those areas and we'll drive by there just to maintain that presence.
Yeah.
For we know that there's areas that need some oversight, if you will, or maybe a deterrent from us just driving by. And also working with our sheriff's partners, they're aware of it too, so they know where those hot spots we have. Those conversations that I have with Captain Mulder and Lieutenant Lapkin on those type of issues. So there's that awareness with your law partners and fire partners.
Yeah. Well, it continues to be a problem, so I don't know if there's something more that code enforcement can do. I mean, I know that when I was there, the owner of the property came out, and I mean, abandoned buildings are certainly a problem, as Mr. Watts said as well.
Yeah, so Commissioner Nickel, code enforcement does have a case open on that property. It is something that they work very closely with our West Hollywood Sheriff Station on, so Lieutenant Lapkin's team. So they try to patrol as often as they can. And so they are working with the property owner. There were some obstacles and some hurdles with the development of the property, obviously, and that's no fault of the public. And so staff will continue to prioritize that particular case. I unfortunately can't get into the details of the investigation and where it's at, but I will let you know that staff is certainly aware of it and they'll continue their efforts on that.
Good. It's good to know. Thank you.
Sure.
And then I just wanted to mention, I noticed that the light at Station 8, the stop light, finally seems like it's gone up, is getting ready to become active.
That is correct. So we're just waiting for the switch to get flipped, however that looks. So we're close. And I know we had some significant delays because of manufacturing parts and import and all kinds of stuff. So thank you to West Hollywood and Danny for all the support for keeping the ball moving forward. So thank you very much. It's going to really, really benefit our apparatus getting in and out of Station 8. That's going to be a huge, huge safety relief for us to provide some of that extra safety we need to get all that equipment into Station 8. So
Great.
thank you for that.
Thank you.
I have a question. The Ralph's at Fountain and La Brea, on the Detroit side, the back of the building, is an emergency evacuation stairwell. And I believe a few weeks ago there was a fire in the stairwell. Does your report reflect that fire? Because I'm curious to know what happened. It seems to be an area that is frequented by transient individuals, and it's been an ongoing problem.
I don't have any specifics on that fire. I know that it was small in nature.
Okay.
But if it was a larger fire, we'd all know about it, of course, if it impacted the Ralphs. But there's a lot of that, and I'm just telling you, it's a moving target with the transient population and how fires start. They go together. They really do. And so we know that that's a lot of the focus here because we have that issue. And our job is to make sure that we keep the fires small, and then we'll investigate how they started through our arson investigation unit within the department.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I was going to ask, are there any public questions for this item?
Yes, we have one public comment. Rick Rotz.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Secretary.
Yes, just one further thing I wanted to add regarding 1280 Sweetser with respect to fire hazard, in addition to all the brush and so forth. When a neighbor and I were over at that property, we had watched a couple of transients go in and out of the property. When we were leaving the front yard, we found a gas can, still with gasoline in it, stuffed in the brush there. We didn't leave it. In fact, I took it and was recommended and followed through on taking it over to one of the fire stations that went over on San Vicente and delivered handed it off to one of your colleagues. But it just further underlines the continuing hazard that property represents. And again, I just want to, in light of what happened over the weekend under the freeway downtown with another scofflaw business owner there that was in violation of their agreement with Caltrans. That this property continues to be a property and a problem property, and if something like this, or a second arson fire occurs at that property, or an accidental fire, such as the warming fire that took place a year ago February, happens in the middle of the night when there are 40, 50 mile an hour Santa Ana winds howling through there, it's going to be picking off embers and throwing them onto the roofs of apartment buildings all the way down the block and touching off spot fires. And there's, apologies aren't going to do any good at that point, particularly if people are harmed or killed or put out of their homes as a result of the fires that could then occur, and you could end up with like a block-sized fire coming out of that. So please give Danny whatever he needs to, or recommend a council give to Danny whatever he needs to get this taken care of. Thank you.
Commission Secretary, any additional public comments?
We don't have any additional comments.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. We probably won't see you until after Thanksgiving, so have a wonderful holiday.
You too, and thank you for the support. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Our next agenda item 7B, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department will now provide a report on activity for the month of October. Good evening.
Good evening. So you may have noticed that there was a difference in how we provide our data to you. We went off of some of the feedback that you've had in previous meetings, and we tried to break down that data a little bit more, have a better understanding for categories, things like that. So the data that you guys are getting for this meeting, for this agenda packet, obviously it looks a little bit different. There's more information in there about other topics, other areas. And again, we did that in response to some of the inquiries that you had from us and trying to get more information to you. So moving forward, that's probably how it's going to continue to look. We can probably make some changes if items or things come up. But with that data, what we're going to do now with our report is just give you some basics from that data and then highlight some of the incidents from the month. So from October, we had 1,792 calls for service for the station. There was 47 arrests for felonies and 80 for misdemeanors. There was 237 Part 1 crimes in West Hollywood for the city for the month of October. We just wanted to remind people that our theft numbers are up based on a lot of pickpocketing, vehicle burglaries. We ask people to continue to be vigilant when they're at entertainment venues such as bars and clubs. Be aware where your property's at. We do have that pickpocketing issue still arising quite a bit in our Rainbow District. Vehicle burglaries, we remind people if you're going to be in a shopping district or a retail area, please don't leave things visible. Even if you're in your own parking structure, in your own residence, commercial buildings, whatever it is, do not leave items visible. Thieves are opportunistic, and that's what they're looking for. So these numbers are kind of what's driving our theft issues in the city. For the month of October, our station volunteers donated 247 hours of time. 70.5 of those hours were related to special events within the city. Some of the more notable incidents for the month of October, on October 9th, there was an assault with a deadly weapon call where a gun was used. We spoke about it last meeting, but just to get more detail on it, it was in the 7700 block of Santa Monica Boulevard. There was a patron that was in the location, and he was ejected by the staff for causing a disturbance. He then returned with a gun and shot the security guard. The guard was hospitalized, and the suspect was arrested at the scene. On October 15th, in the 7700 block of Norton, there was an unhoused individual that was in a parking garage, and when someone asked that person to leave, the suspect became upset, used a metal pipe to strike that person in the shoulder. The suspect was located and arrested nearby. On October 19th at 4:45 in the evening, a burglary just occurred call was dispatched. Our deputies arrived at the location and located the suspects in a vehicle. The deputies attempted to pull over the vehicle and the suspects fled. Deputies pursued the suspects for a short distance. When the suspects entered into a cul-de-sac, the vehicle turned around and was head-on with the deputies. The vehicle then rammed the patrol car. The passenger side door of the patrol car struck the deputy that was trying to exit the vehicle at the time. The deputy at the time was taken to the hospital in serious condition. The suspects fled the area and were not able to be located at the time. Detectives were able to identify who the suspects were and track them down. Several arrests have been made as a result. Our deputy has since been released from the hospital and is recovering at home. On October 18th, we concluded this year's session of our Community Academy. The program went extremely well and received positive feedback from all the participants. Several of our graduates are now in the process of becoming station volunteers. Others have expressed interest in participating in the program again next year. For Halloween, this year's Halloween Carnival was a success. We worked well with the city, the fire department, our Emergency Operations Bureau to conduct a safe event with the deputies out on patrol. We estimated that there was well over 100,000 people in attendance. Some estimates say up to 200,000. It's really tough to tell how many were there, but best guess, anywhere from 100 to 200,000 people. There was very few significant incidents within the floor plan of the event. We only had 4 arrests for the entire night. Now we'll open up to any questions you guys may have regarding October information or our new crime stat sheets that we've given you guys.
Commissioners, any questions?
Yes. Good evening, Lieutenant and Sergeant. Good to see you guys. First, I want to say great job on Halloween. I think it was a success. I'm not aware of any major incidents that occurred. So I want to thank you guys, the entire Sheriff's Department, the Fire Department, block by block, for keeping all of its visitors of West Hollywood, the employees of West Hollywood, business owners safe during this time. And it was, like I said, it was a fun event, and looking forward to next year's. I also want to ask one question about a vacant property that keeps coming up that neighbors keep bringing to my attention at 1030 North Sierra Bonita. And the concern of the neighbors who live directly next door to that property is that there's a lot of dry rubbish, dry trees, and they're concerned that anyone who goes in there will start a fire that will lead to the neighboring apartment building that houses, I believe, 9 units. Code compliance has been on the scenes numerous times. The Sheriff's Department have been there numerous times. Station 7 has been there numerous times. What can we do to finally mitigate that to where we could have that either locked up, Danny, or something could be done to that property at 1030 North Sierra Bonita, because it's a constant daily visit, either from the Sheriff's Department, code compliance, security ambassadors, or fire. So we'd love to know what can be done about that, so I could relay that to the residents who live next door to that building.
Sure, absolutely. And Sergeant Duran and Lieutenant Lapke can add to anything that I mentioned, but I can definitely check in. I don't know the status of that case, or if we do have, in fact, a code enforcement case, but I'm assuming from what you're mentioning, if code enforcement staff have been out there, then I would assume that there is an active, ongoing case. Vacant properties at times pose a variety of challenges if a property owner is absentee. If there are, issues that do occur intermittently, but if time passes and if it's just merely kind of a property maintenance related issue, it sounds like maybe there's more going on here. But we'll definitely connect with our code enforcement team and the manager, get staff out there. I'll ask for an update and some background on that. But just in general, in terms of how to address these issues, if there are calls for service that are being confirmed, and so meaning that our West Hollywood Sheriff Station deputies are actually responding, they are, apprehending or removing somebody from the property, or if there are calls for service as it relates to our fire station, and that's confirmed, where there is maybe a fire, a rubbish fire, regardless of size, then all of that data is very helpful for our code enforcement team, because what that allows them to do is pursue a variety of different legal options for them to address these types of situations. There is a lengthy administrative process, though, involved with that, and so that could be anywhere from the city pursuing what's called a public nuisance abatement process, to having our city prosecutor's office file a criminal and or civil complaint on a property. But these take several months of work and documentation to showcase, because ultimately you're having to go to a court and you're having to prove, that the property is in fact nuisance, it's a potential danger to members of the community, and that we're allowed to take action, from the different things that I mentioned. So again, I don't know the status of the case, but I'll definitely follow up with code enforcement, see where they're at, and I can follow up with you.
I would appreciate it, because ideally I think what the neighbors want, they want that property boarded up, because there was another property across the street from that at 1021 maybe, Sarah Bonita. It's the same developer, but they finally tore down that property, and it's all fenced up now. And they used to have a security guard there 24/7, but since the building's been demolished, there's no reason to have a security guard there. How do we go about maybe having that developer, it's the same developer, was at 1021, I believe, to get a security guard there to at least fence it up, board it up, to prevent any access from the unhoused or anyone from the outside going in there?
Yeah, so there is a process. Our vacant property ordinance does allow us to order that there be security at different times, even up to 24 hours, 7 days a week. But that threshold is difficult to accomplish. And so, as I mentioned, me not knowing the background, but if there are a lot of confirmed calls for service that we could acquire both from our fire department and from our West Hollywood Sheriff Station, then all of that is helpful information, to help justify when the city does make an order. And many times when we do require security, it's contested, it's appealed by the property owners, and so that goes through a hearing process, and it could even end up in court. So we want to make sure, when we do order security, that we have the support, to do so from a legal perspective. And so we're consulted with, I am consulted with when it comes to that point from our code enforcement manager, and then we consult with our city attorney's office as well, just to make sure that we have a strong case, in terms of kind of pursuing different elements of that. So we'll definitely look at that, but having security is by far, when you're having a lot of trespassing that's going on, boarding up a property, even fencing a property, in my professional experience, does not prevent folks from accessing a property. It really takes having that security there on site to act as that deterrent. But there's a pretty difficult threshold to kind of meet in order to do so. But we'll look at that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Blau.
Thank you. Lieutenant and Sergeant Drawn, thank you, and as well, thanks to whoever put together this report. As you mentioned previously, it's a lot of manual effort, especially, it sounded like, in the traffic statistics category, so thank them, and thank you as well for updating this. I think it'll be very helpful for all kind of moving forward. I do have a question around the traffic statistics section. What is the difference between the total traffic reports versus the items tabulated below? Because the name makes me think that it would be the sum of all of those, but it's not.
So a traffic report is just a traffic collision. So whether it's involved with another vehicle, a property, or whatnot, that's just solely a traffic collision report. And then you have the traffic reports with the vehicle versus the pedestrian, and then you have a traffic collision of a vehicle with the bicyclist, and then you have, so that's what, so a standalone traffic report is just vehicles, no pedestrians involved, no bicyclists involved. So.
Okay,
that's what that
great.
means.
Thank you. That was super helpful. Yeah, great. In the, I just wanted to clarify one point as well in here. In the theft from motor vehicles category, the grand theft of vehicle parts, which is up really high, as you've helpfully shown in the percent change year over year, year to date, year over year. That's primarily the catalytic converters, correct? Or are there other vehicle parts that are kind of susceptible to
There
grand
are,
theft?
from time to time, there are other parts, but our statistics are basically catalytic converter theft. That's what was driving it at the beginning of the year. Those numbers have been steady declining throughout the year now.
Right.
But yeah, the majority catalytic converter thefts. However, there are some other parts that do get stolen from time to time.
What do you recall, kind of ish, what time of year that one of those clinics on etching of the catalytic converters was held? Because obviously, I know that there were a couple this year, and I'm wondering if there's a direct cause and relationship that we're seeing here.
We've
to your
done
benefit.
2 this year,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to remember the last month that we've had it. It's been at least 3 months or so now.
Okay.
Beverly Hills Police just did one this past month. Yeah, I mean, it does help. It is a deterrent in some type of way that may not necessarily completely stop it, but it deters. So
Right.
That may be helping those numbers.
Right. Right. Okay. Great. Thank you. Yeah, and then I've also just noticed in my walkings around the city, the sheriff deputies doing their proactive traffic monitoring. So I appreciate that, and I want to share that thanks as well, because I know obviously when they're not getting a call, they're getting lots of calls, but the traffic incidents, especially as it relates to pedestrians or neighborhood livability, is very important as well. So I appreciate seeing that as well. So thank you. And that's it. So thank you.
Okay, great. We're going to circle back to Commissioner Ramian. Apologies, he had one additional question.
Thank you, Chair. One other quick question for the Sheriff's Department. I believe the city had installed cameras throughout the city, correct? Like red light cameras and license plate readers, excuse me. Are we going to see those statistics on our report? How many hits we got from those, the red light cameras or the license plate readers, or how many arrests were done? Are we going to see those, that data come to us?
It varies because we can get the hits, but the hits don't necessarily translate into how many arrests, how many vehicles. That's just the 39, 40 cameras are reading. It's just the cameras reading, whether it be from stolen vehicles or wanted vehicles. So when we refer to a wanted vehicle as somebody who committed a burglary or robbery, who's whatever agency put on their license plate that they're wanted, not necessarily stolen. So the translation into our computer systems, and we're going to go back to the same thing. Our computer systems don't communicate. Our flock system, we can get the number of hits, but we can tell you the number of hits for October, whatever they were, but I couldn't tell you, and we're still trying to collect that data because it's not as simple as doing a word search for flock or stolen vehicles. It doesn't happen that way. It's physical labor where we have to look at every report that was taken for a stolen vehicle that was recovered, and whether or not a flock camera was or an Alpers camera was used for that. And it does not always relate to that, but I can tell you from the number of arrests that we've had, and I don't have the numbers now because we're still trying to figure out how we're going to collect that data, but the cameras have helped. The cameras have helped where the deputies get an alert and then they see the vehicle They go look for the vehicle. For example, let's say La Brea. They get a hit of the vehicle, and it gives a description, it gives a color, it gives all the information what it's wanted for. Then the deputies drive around the area. Sometimes it's the car in front of them because they don't necessarily have to use a flock or the Alpers. They can just use the computer in their car, and it'll tell them. And even the flock cameras, we still have to verify that through our computer systems. So they can come up on flock, but it's been dropped off on our regular stolen, what we call stolen vehicle system. So we still have to verify that. But I can tell you that it's definitely helped. I think in the month of, last month, I think we had between 6 to 8 arrests from the use of the flock cameras. So I think we had, for all intents and purposes, I think we had 292 hits in October. But again, we have to remember that the hits don't necessarily translate into arrest or recovered vehicles. And then a lot of the time, even if we do go, let's say a deputy is behind the person that's driving that stolen vehicle or that wanted vehicle, if we go in pursuit, there's a lot of factors. A lot of the time, the deputies are canceling their own pursuits because of safety reasons. Speed, traffic, you name it. Normally, it's a watch commander that would cancel a pursuit for unsafe speeds, or there's certain information that we have to give when we are in pursuit of a stolen vehicle. But a lot of the times in this month at least, I know that the deputies have canceled their own pursuits for speed. So even if the deputy is behind that stolen vehicle, a lot of the time they'll cancel their pursuit for safety reasons. So, but they have been helping. It's a great asset to us.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nickel.
And Chair, I'm sorry, just before Commissioner, I just want to make one point of clarification too. So the city does not have any red light cameras, so I know that was mentioned. We do have ALPR cameras, automated license plate readers, but the city no longer has any sort of red light cameras.
Thank you, Director Rivas. Commissioner Nickel.
Thank you, Chair. Sergeant Tehran, Lieutenant Lapkin, good to see you. Thank you for your report. I wanted to ask about at least one instance I know of anti-Semitic graffiti that was on Sunset, on the sidewalk, on a building. Is there anything you can say about that? Are there any suspects?
There was no known suspects. When the deputies went there, they checked the location, and there is no graffiti that they can find that was for that specific one on Sunset. They looked, they checked the area, they contacted the informant, and they could not find the graffiti. So then we wouldn't know if it might possibly be connected to what happened at Cantor's. The same thing. Yeah, don't know. Okay, and of course, there are increased tensions after Hamas's attack on Israel. I am not asking for any specifics, but just to reassure the residents of our community that our station is aware and doing everything possible to ensure their safety. Absolutely. I mean, even during the times where, from the onset of that, we've increased our footbeats. Any Jewish community, school, our patrol deputies have done increased their patrol checks there. They actually have gone to contact the management to say, hey, we're here if you need anything. So our footbeats, our patrol checks have increased. And we always say, you know, Captain Mulder always says, if you see something, say something. So anybody that sees anything suspicious, call us and then we go investigate it. But we've definitely increased our number of patrols in the synagogues, or not necessarily synagogues, but any Jewish community that is within our city. So yes. Great, thank you. And as far as robberies and burglaries, they're up. There have been a number that got a little bit of media attention. There was a safe that was stolen at La Boheme. That one was it was a burglary at La Boheme, and there was and unfortunately they're not the only ones. There is potentially a crew, the same crew that was here in 2019, and we think that that's the same crew that's coming down here and that they're doing the commercial burglaries. But it's not only West Hollywood; it's LA, it's Beverly Hills. So I know that there's been several arrests through Beverly Hills in regards to that. I don't know if those arrests are connected to the ones that unfortunately were, LeBoen was one of the victims of that.
I was actually going to ask about Cruz because there's also the notice that I received and many people received about a woman as part of a Romanian robbery gang. I mean, I know that we have dealings with some South Americans. We have some issues with pickpocketing, but is this something new? Do you think she's the only one, or is it a...
Oh no, this crew is known nationwide. They're in California, they're in Washington, they're everywhere nationwide. They're more into the white collar type of crimes, identity theft, going to stores and take property. It's not as rampant as the commercial burglaries, the grabs and the smash and grabs that we've had. Well, not us, but in the area. But yes, they're known, and they've been known for quite some time. But these individuals are even looked at by our major crimes. The state and the feds are looking at them as well. But it's a ring that is nationwide, and we in law enforcement have a map of where these crews tend to operate. And one of the beauties of law enforcement in general, we all communicate. So there is our crime analyst, which is Brian, who came up with the new format. He is in contact with all the other crime analysts in the West Side and beyond. So they share intel, they share information. So if a specific crime is happening in Beverly Hills, he knows, and then he pushes it out to the deputies. So that's how the communication. So we have a great working relationship. It's not just our local, but just statewide and nationwide with other law enforcement agencies.
Right. And I don't suppose she's been apprehended. No. Speaking of Beverly Hills, I did want to ask you about, on November 6th, there was a murder suspect that was arrested within 30 minutes because of the real-time watch center. So I know that, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, we'll be getting to the technology and everything a little bit later, but if we were to have a similar series of cameras and a real-time watch center in West Hollywood, could it be as effective as it obviously is in Beverly Hills? And could it also identify some of the suspects for everything from graffiti to these robberies and burglaries?
This is a twofold question. Can it assist us? Absolutely, because we work very well with Beverly Hills, and they help us because our suspects don't know boundary lines. They don't know, so they come and go from Beverly Hills, LAPD. So in personal opinion, absolutely. Can it help us solve problems? Absolutely. Can it capture information that the naked eye cannot see as far as description of people? Yes. Can it identify by looking at the face recognition? No. I mean, there are systems that we could potentially use, but no. Those the cameras that Beverly Hills has, I mean, they're definitely an asset to them. So anything that can enhance a way of solving problems, solving crime. There's a lot of times where, just for example, even on without getting into the technologies, like just a drone, we can send a drone out before the deputies get there. If a suspect is changing clothing, the drone will catch that information. So can they be multifaceted use? Absolutely, because we know that it's worked not only for Beverly Hills, but for other agencies. So yes, it will be an asset to us as well.
Great. And continuing working with our neighbors, I wanted to ask Poinsettia Park, there are issues there again with encampments, which of course is Los Angeles. But it's just a footstep right across the border, so a lot of West Hollywood residents do ask about it. Our station coordinates with LAPD.
Absolutely. I'm in contact with the SLO next door with the lead officer that handles that area, and we're in constant contact. But unfortunately, the way the city works and the way the county works, they're different entities. But they are working. They've cited numerous people. They've arrested. Their narcotics team has gone in there and done, several what they call buys. So they're constantly working it. But it's They have different rules on how to clear the streets. I know that our deputies, the cops team, and then even our just patrol are constantly driving on Poinsettia just to make sure that they don't come on our side. And if they do come on our side, we have an amazing social services system that we offer them services. As you can see from our stats, they don't take any of the services. But we do, it's one of our daily checks that, especially the cops team, that's a routine of places where they check to make sure that it doesn't impact our area too much, but we know that it does impact our area. But I know that they're working. The city knows about the issues. We're in constant contact with them, but they can only do so much with what resources they have.
Understood. And then e-scooters. There were no citations listed. We see them riding on the sidewalks all the time. I don't even know, would that start a pursuit? I mean, what would that even look at? Why are there no citations for e-scooters? And what would it involve to do that?
So why there's no e-scooter citations, I couldn't tell you as to why. Can we concentrate doing an operation on e-scooters? Yes. But our traffic units, we're limited to traffic units, and they have to see the violation in order for it to happen. So let's say you call, there's an e-scooter, by the time we get there, there's no scooter on the sidewalk. So, I mean, unfortunately, it's a cat and mouse game if we get to that. I mean, there's something that we can, try to see if we can do an operation, if that's the will of the city, council would want to do, an operation on that, but we do. I mean, there has been sites, but just not in the month of October.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Commissioner Freiberg.
Hi, ma'am.
It's very clear, so I thank you for that, and thank you for all you've done for Halloween, keeping everybody safe. I mean, I know it's a big venue and people come from all over the place, but I just felt safe the entire time. One thing I did want to talk to you about was the Civilian Oversight Commission for LA County Sheriffs, and they came out with a report for 2023 on their factual findings for deputy gangs and cliques that have existed since the 70s in the Sheriff's Department. They reported on decades of egregious conduct, law violations, excessive use of force to not only the public, but their fellow deputies. And this goes all the way up the chain of command, which I'm sure you know all of this. And then on top of that, they're protected by the LA County Council and certain police associations. But just to name a few, so in case the commission isn't aware, just the names, the regulators, the banditos, the executioners, the cowboys, the Vikings, the Spartans, the Reapers, the rattlesnakes, wayside whiteys, and they have their tattoos and gestures and everything else that comes along with it. So I think, I don't know if anyone has ever asked you this, if there are any of these members that you are aware of that are in our department. Both of you, I'll ask.
Personally, no. I mean, I don't believe the Sheriff's Department has gangs.
Or even just members. Because they also mentioned cliques too, which is, I don't know if you had read the report, but it's like a subgroup, they turn into gangs. So it's kind of how they start.
I mean, I can speak for West Hollywood, and I know in West Hollywood we don't have any of that. I can't speak for any other stations that I haven't worked for or previous stations that I worked at. I've never seen it, so
I'm just concerned with West Hollywood.
West Hollywood, no. I can guarantee you there's nothing of that sort or any allegation of that sort here.
Okay, good to know and good to hear. I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about, we had mentioned trying to obtain comments, complaints regarding the sheriff's station, and you had come back and said that you weren't allowed to share anything because of the Sheriff's Bill of Rights. And I was wondering if you would be able to share anything that falls under SB 1421, the Right to Know Act, which would include serious use of force, sexual misconduct, or dishonesty relating to an investigation. Is that something that you'd be able to share with us?
So I know I'm not sure if you were here for that meeting, but we did present those numbers, all the complaints. I'm trying to think top of my head what other things were on the Department of Justice there's the quarterly report. I don't have that information in front of me, but I can resend it to Director Rivas on where you can grab that information. It doesn't say specifically for the sheriff's station, but it breaks down time off, of what they got the time off for. It'll break down all the different violations, if you want to say. So there's 2 different links that you can go to, and I don't have that information in front of me. That'll give you that information. The number of complaints, number of accommodations that were issued and given here in West Hollywood, but it's on a quarterly basis. Because we won't be able to provide that information on a monthly basis and specifics because of the Bill of Rights. But because the Department of Justice provides that already, and our department provides it as well. And again, I'm trying to recall in my head where you can go on the website, but I can't right now. But I know it's under the Sheriff's Department website, and I can send that information again, and it'll give you all the information as to complaints, accommodations, and then any days off that deputy supervisors or anybody has received within the department.
Because of misconduct?
For misconduct.
Is this something that we can get maybe quarterly, maybe twice a year?
It's
that
already
you can provide us?
It's already provided on the Department of Justice website.
But I'm saying for us, for our meetings.
I would just have to give you the link to it because that's where the department already provides that for them. So we can just grab the information that they have on their website, and that's how we get it.
I mean, if you could do that, that'd be great. So this way the public would have it in our agenda packet too.
I don't know if we can do it through the agenda packet. I mean, there's something that we can discuss, but we can give you the links as to provide a link to get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, and this just to also add, so it's actually through the Office of the Inspector General, through the County of Los Angeles, and you can locate that information, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department website. I mean, we'll do a little more research in terms of what we can provide. And that same report that's provided on a quarterly basis, as Lieutenant Lapkin had mentioned, is also presented to the Los Angeles County Civilian Oversight Commission. And so we can see about, adding it or something like the month after. I don't know. I'm assuming that they'll release it, right? And then that'll reflect, like if we're in November, it'll probably reflect, right, October, September, and August, kind of that quarterly. And I'm just using that as an example, but we can look into that and see if we could provide that.
And then I think my other question probably would be to you, Director Rivas, is how do you evaluate the Sheriff's Department? How does the city do it? Just in summary.
In terms of evaluating the overall service? So, I mean, what we look at is the information that, of course, that you're seeing that's provided on a monthly basis, and we do kind of a year-to-date. What you're seeing actually this month is kind of be the new format moving forward, where you're able to see kind of those trends, right, from the calendar year, beginning of the calendar year from January to where we're at, and so that you can see that from the year prior. And so we're looking at response time. We're looking at, obviously, how's that being impacted by calls for service, and then we're looking at Part 1 crimes. And so we're looking at, obviously, the decrease, increase. And so that is how we are in discussion with the sheriff's station, in terms of what ways we can improve on in certain areas. As the report, if you observe it, you look at kind of overall, Part 1 crime is down this calendar year in comparison to last calendar year. Obviously, there's certain crimes and types of crimes that you're seeing that are more elevated in certain areas, and then you're seeing decreases in other areas as well. But overall, Part 1 crime is down this calendar year when you look at the last 10 months of this calendar year and you compare that to last calendar year.
So you're just going off of the statistics is what you're saying?
We do base it off of statistics and data, absolutely. And of course, if there are other indicators, other issues and things that are emerging through the community, then we certainly work with our West Hollywood Sheriff Station on those types of issues to make improvements where needed.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Nickel.
Actually, just following up on that, on evaluating, how many sworn officers do we have at this time at the West Hollywood Sheriff Station?
We have 52 for the city.
We have 52 for the city. So the last 2 that were added, you have not been able to add yet, or have you?
Not officially to the contract. They are working, but not officially on the contract because there is a freeze because of the lack of, not the lack of, but because we have, I think, over 1,000 vacancies within our department, so we couldn't add anything to the contract, but they have been added to patrol. I mean, they have been added, but yes, not on the contract.
Right. So I know that the FBI does follow employment data for police stations across the country, and the average is 2.4 sworn officers per 1,000 residents. So I think that we're at like 36,000 people in West Hollywood. That, of course, doesn't include our nightlife and how we swell on the weekends. But I believe, I mean, I went to a liberal arts college. I'm not terribly mathy, but I think that's about 88 sworn officers that we should have if we were to go by the average for the nation. I know that Mayor Bass in Los Angeles has a goal of 10,000 officers, and if you do those numbers, the population of the city of Los Angeles and 2.4 would be 10,000 officers. So I know that we've never been there. I think our height was around 67 in like 2007 or something. But I know that there are issues as far as added pressures on officers dealing with, you have to be right all the time. That's it. Officers just have to be right all the time. So there's a lot of pressures, and a lot of you are working longer hours than necessary. I just wanted to get those numbers out there.
Okay.
If there's anything you would like to say.
I mean, all I can say, even if we had a blank check to hire the amount of deputies that the city, based on the national average, unfortunately, nationwide, the amount of deputies or officers that are lining up to get into law enforcement are not there. And that's where the challenges are, that nationwide, not just us, we are, our attrition rate, our number of qualified individuals, or just people that want to get into law enforcement the numbers are decreasing, so it's a challenge, again, even if we had a blank check to say, here, hire the 82 nationwide that they would be, it'll be difficult for us because of the challenges that nationwide we're facing.
Understood. And I will, speaking of nationwide, I hate to beat a dead horse, but before our special study session, when we were talking to CPE, I, of course, spoke with an older person in Ithaca, and it had been suggested that they completely do away with their sheriff's department. And so I asked, well, what is the state of your sheriff's department now? What is morale like? Because they managed to not move forward with those efforts. The mayor resigned. They had 35. They had 70 before it because they couldn't keep people and they couldn't hire because they felt that they weren't wanted. So, thank you.
Just one more point, though, that I'd like to add. The city has a contract with our West Hollywood Sheriff Station for 61 sworn officers at this time. So I just want to make sure I clarify that number. It's not 52. It's 61 sworn officers that the city currently contracts with our West Hollywood Sheriff Station for.
I apologize. I forgot to count the teams.
No worries.
Still not 88, but thank you.
Thank you, Director Rivas. Sergeant Duran, I had given you a report number that was attached to a vehicle burglary on Detroit, and I'd asked if there were any others that were reported. What were the findings? Because I've been informed by residents that there have been several vehicle break-ins on Detroit, south of Fountain and north of Lexington. And I know there have been mornings when I walk my dog when I've seen several vehicles with smashed windows.
So for Detroit, I had our crime analyst pull up the number of vehicle burglary reports on Detroit within the city area, obviously, and there was only 2 for the year. However, on the east end, or the east district of the city, those numbers have been increasing. The particular reports that you gave me, they're basically what we would refer to as a whodunit report. We don't know. We don't have any active suspects right now.
Is there any way to increase patrol at night? Because on Detroit, it's not the best lit street in the city.
Yeah, for sure. We base a lot of our directed patrols or our crime suppression type of operations based on our crime data that we have. So when we see an increase in a particular part of the city, we direct our personnel or our special teams to focus on those areas. And the East End is definitely one of those places that it's on our radar, for sure.
Okay. And I would guess probably because the parking is on the side adjacent to Ralph's, there are no residential units on that side of the street where you would have more eyes available. It's kind of like a blind side. This could be part of the issue.
It could be, and it could have something to do with the stairwell that you're referring to with the Ralph's area, that there is that issue with some unhoused and people going to and from that area, and it's kind of not really well lit. Yeah, it could possibly be a factor.
Okay, thank you. Director Rivas, I have a question for you, piggybacking on what you had mentioned earlier about possible patrols at derelict properties. Does that or can that also apply for derelict developments that are just sitting and lobbying without any work going on? Because 1159 North Formosa is becoming a huge problem. And there has not been any work at that location 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, so to answer your question, yes. Our code enforcement staff actually will do periodic inspections of construction sites, especially if there isn't any sort of activity that's going on. And in many instances, unfortunately, you'll have trespassing that's going on. But if it's related to kind of the duration of time of work that's being done, then that's something that's different for code enforcement staff. Obviously, they rely on the development process, and so they'll look at, is there an active building permit, on a property, et cetera. So they'll look at kind of all of that globally, but their concentration and their focus is going to be more of the public nuisance type of issues that they're going to concentrate on and focus. So if a construction site is not being properly maintained, if there's trespassing that's going on, then those are absolutely things that code enforcement staff can take a look at. So I did jot down the address that you meant, 1159 Formosa, so I'll make sure I pass that on as well to the code enforcement team.
Thank you. Commissioner Secretary, do we have any questions from anyone in chambers for our sheriffs?
Yes, we have Kevin Burton. If he wants to come up to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Resident of West Hollywood, and I just want to comment, Sergeant Duran mentioned a new organization of the Sheriff's Report in your packet, and I do notice that there is a brief listing of 2 collisions between vehicles and pedestrians, 2 collisions between vehicles and bicycles last month. Traditionally, meaning for at least 8 years, the report on those collisions has included the date, the time, the location of the collision, as well as the assignment of fault by the responding deputy, which gives some idea of what happened at the collision. That's all very useful information for the community to have, as well as for the commission, I believe. And that information is not in the report this month, and I do hope that that will be restored and at future meetings in the sheriff's report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Secretary, any additional public comments?
We don't have any additional comments.
Okay, great. Lieutenant Lapkin, Sergeant Duran, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7C, the block-by-block security ambassadors will now provide a report on activity for the month of October. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. David Aguilar, Regional Vice President with Block by Block. I am filling in for General Manager Erica Leon, who is currently out of the office, but she will be back on Wednesday. So real quickly, just jumping into the report for October, the team saw an increase in just about all categories for the month of October. Primarily with we saw an increase with our business contacts. We saw an increase in our unhoused resident contacts, our calls for service, and our requests for assistance from the Sheriff's Department. The east side part of town and the center city or mid-city area definitely saw an increase. I would say the center city probably saw a significant increase just compared to the past few months. So a bulk of those calls and the activity that they saw was in regards to the unhoused population, for sure. So I believe the team is currently looking at just kind of adjusting some of our patrols to address some of those concerns in those areas. There was definitely a strong push for the business contacts just because of the Halloween Carnival coming up, and just historical purposes, we've always fielded quite a few questions from business owners, primarily regarding street closures. So ambassadors were fielding a lot of questions in regards to the street closures, so they were able to provide a lot of information and also direct folks over to the city page that had everything outlined as far as what streets were going to be closed and just how to get around the event. In the month of October, Healthcare in Action also held a training with the team here on the west side part of town. They provided just updates to some of the resources for the unhoused services that they are offering, as well as updated contact information. So the team's actively working with the Healthcare in Action team. Regarding Halloween, so the team definitely had a strong presence throughout the city. Primary focus was the residentials, and so we were just helping with ushering folks back down to the festivities. We had quite a few folks along Santa Monica Boulevard. We had folks on the pickup trolleys. We also had staff on the city line, which was picking folks up and dropping folks off at the Hollywood and Highland Station. We actually partnered with our teams over in Hollywood, so we were also in Hollywood. We were actually able to staff those city lines with some of our Hollywood ambassadors who work very closely with LAPD, and so that was the whole strategy behind that. In the event there was a concern, we were able to connect with our dispatch center there, who would connect with LAPD directly. Fortunately, there were no issues that were reported for the city line, for the pickup trolley, or any of our teams along the boulevard and the adjacent residentials. There were a few questions that got passed on to me, so I know there was a request for a year-to-year comparison of the statistics, so you will see that next month. And then Commissioner Nickel, I believe you also had a question about the improper scooter parking. So I did follow up with Erica on that. And so to answer your question, it's not very time-consuming, doesn't take up a whole lot of their time. But the idea is if they see a scooter that's in the public right-of-way obstructing pedestrian traffic, they stop very quickly, they pick it up, they move it off to the side, they log that into our reporting system. I can see it becoming a time-consuming issue if our ambassadors are riding down the boulevard and they have to stop on a frequent basis to remove scooters that they identify that may be obstructing public right-of-way. But I'd have to follow up with Erica on that just to see if that is the case. That is a fairly common issue that we see in other districts that we're in, and that is a big part of the time that's spent by ambassadors who just are on foot patrols, constantly picking up scooters and removing them from the public right-of-way. That's all I have for the month. I did note just some of the concerns that have been brought up in regards to some of the issues on the east side, some of the property vacancies, so I'll connect with Erica and the team just to see if there's additional support that we can provide with just having ambassadors check through some of these areas, both on the east side and as well as the vacant property that was mentioned over for Sweetser as well. So, any questions?
Yes, Commissioner Aramian.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for your report. I also want to say good job for all the ambassadors for Halloween. I saw a huge presence. They were making contact, and I do appreciate everything that they do and everything that Block by Block is doing for our city. My question is Block by Block, are we at full capacity with ambassadors right now?
I'd have to double check on that. So we're not at full capacity, but we're very close to that. I'd have to follow up with her just to see what that exact number is, though.
And the only reason I ask is because I believe there's still some areas of West Hollywood that residents are not seeing a presence of the ambassadors. There's a resident that always reaches out, especially is it La Brea and Fountain.
Okay.
Do you guys go past McDonald's on La Brea? Where do you guys like?
Yes. So we do go up to Fountain, and so we don't go further north of Fountain. So they do swing by the McDonald's. I know there was a request for some attention over at the Huxley, which I believe the team was providing, but they don't go further north of Fountain on the east side part of town.
And do they also make their way through the streets of West Hollywood and like off of Fountain, going north of Fountain, but in the city limits of West Hollywood? Because I also hear that they're not being visible in that jurisdiction of the area as well. So I'll have to get the proper name of the street. It just slipped my mind, but there's some areas of West Hollywood that some residents are not seeing security ambassadors patrol.
Sure. I mean, if we are able to just identify those streets, that would be helpful because I can pass that information on to them. But as long as they're within the city limits, there should be no issue with having our ambassadors provide additional patrols in those areas.
And the last thing I have, the ambassadors deal a lot with the unhoused community here in West Hollywood. What are your thoughts of possibly maybe, I know the sheriff's department have social workers that ride with them, but what if we had a social worker ride in the block by block pickup during 9 to 5 hours to make that contact with the unhoused as well? Because if the sheriffs are utilizing that, most of the times when we are calling for service to block by block and they are responding, I feel it will be beneficial to have a social worker there with block by block as well to offer services and see if they're willing to take those services. That's something that could possibly be addressed, maybe bring it up to city council, or how we can go about maybe utilizing social services with block by block as well.
It could be a possibility. We would have to look at the liability side on our end, just because we're putting someone who's not an employee of our company into one of our company vehicles, and God forbid there's an accident. But I'm sure there may be waivers that someone can sign. So I'm not going to say no, but that is definitely a possibility. I can definitely see the benefit. But I will say that Healthcare in Action has been pretty responsive. So when ambassadors have come across issues out there, they are contacting them and they are coming out to assist, as well as just some of the other city partners that are providing the street outreach. So.
And just to add to the response that David had provided from Block by Block 2, so Block by Block has very limited amount of vehicles as a part of their contract. Their main focus is providing foot patrol. And then, of course, you see Block by Block ambassadors on bicycles as well. And so kind of the thought process, right, of kind of having like a dedicated vehicle with an ambassador also creates other additional challenges as well from an operational perspective, because those vehicles, and David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are more slated towards supervisory staff so that they can obviously patrol and check in, right, on their employees and their team members that are out and about. And in addition to the Healthcare in Action, we have the West Hollywood Care Team that just launched as well. And so, this is kind of their initial phase. I believe, Commissioner Raymond, you were here at the last meeting when Corey Plank, our Human Services Manager, did provide an update in terms of kind of the progress and the Step Up initiative, right, and steps that they're going to be taking to eventually get to a 24/7 type of operation, which was what was intended. So I think there's a lot of resources. We just, we need to allow them a little bit of time to kind of get up and running, but we can certainly kind of take a look at, any other available options, given that the ambassadors are out there. I will say that our security ambassador team as well has been receiving briefings from our care team. that's coordinated by our Human Services Division. And so they've been doing a phenomenal job in terms of, going to not only our block by block kind of shift briefings, they've also been going to our West Hollywood Sheriff Station as well as our Los Angeles County Fire Department to inform them about the services they provide, providing them with the contact information. And so those are the three primary agencies, sheriffs, fire, and block by block, that are receiving this information so that when they're out, as you mentioned, on foot patrols, bicycle patrols, or responding to calls for service, or maybe they're happen to be just patrolling in a vehicle or they see something, that they could contact the care team, and then the care team will respond, or Healthcare in Action, or other social services outreach workers. And so they're getting the word out, they're getting more informed, and so hopefully we'll begin to see even more services, obviously, which is the intent, being provided out in the community to our unhoused population.
Thank you, Director Rivas. Commissioner Blau.
Thank you. And Director Rivas stole my point that I was going to talk about, my plug of WeHo Cares. So I'll skip that. But just a point that I would actually add to the benefit of, in general, block by block that we get is, depending on what we see later with the public safety equipment and what City Council decides to do with that. Obviously, a lot of that focus is on, the high visibility areas of the city, Santa Monica, Sunset, Melrose, and, one of those is, fixture mounted cameras. I personally see a big benefit in block by block that it's people oriented. It's people walking around and the contacts and the eyes that they have amongst the city. And I would personally feel more comfortable having more block by block representation, in the residential areas looking out for the neighborhoods than, maybe fixture mounted cameras personally, just a plug there. A question to you, David. In the report, the last section on the response times, just a question. There's 7 calls listed here. How are those selected amongst, the hundreds, the 1,200, 2,400, over 1,200 calls for October? How were those ones selected for showing response times?
So I did notice that as well. So that's a question I'd have to ask Erica.
Okay.
But I wish I had a better response for you. I did see that there were only 7 that were noted on there. So I don't want to say that there were the more significant incidents, and that's why that was reported, so I'd have to follow up with her.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's it.
I'm Commissioner Freeberg.
Good evening. Thank you for your report, and also thank you for all your work for Halloween and keeping everybody safe. I just had a question, and this might be an Erica question. The safety escorts, in September there were 41, October 63. Maybe that had to do with Halloween. But just in general, what are people asking for? Why do they need an escort?
Sure.
And where are they going? Are they going home, or are they?
We have provided escorts to the front door of residents, but I would say that a bulk of those requests are really just walking people back to their cars, walking people back to their vehicles after they leave some of the businesses out here. But sure, every once in a while we will get requests from residents to walk them to their front door from the Gateway Center, from some of the shopping areas. But I would say the number one would probably be just walking them back to their vehicles after they leave some of the businesses here.
So would you say this would be at nighttime and most likely from a bar or club?
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Nickel.
Thank you, Chair. David, thank you for responding to my question about the scooters. So I think you mostly answered it, but looking at your report, it was a total of 347 incidents of improper e-scooter parking. And I did a walk along with you guys a while ago, and of course while I did that, this is what was happening. There were e-scooters, picking them up, putting them aside. Maybe it's something for Erica, but do you know what happens then? Is Bird called? Is Lime called to come pick up the scooters? Or do you guys not have direct contact with them and they're just left there?
So that's a great question. do believe I see Danny going for the mic, so I'll let Commissioner Director Rivas answer the question.
Yeah, absolutely. So their focus is to relocate them to a safe position, right, on the street. So if they are laid over, they're blocking pedestrian access, and an ambassador would be expected to pick up that scooter, right, and maybe move it to a more better area where there's clear width for a pedestrian. It's not blocking anything. They're not responsible for relocating to a designated location. That is not something that they have been given direction to do. But just their assistance in terms of just, if they're acknowledging, while obviously they're patrolling and they're seeing something kind of laid on its side, blocking pedestrian access, then of course they are expected to kind of handle that. So, but as a part of the program that's handled by a different division within the city, we have our contracted providers that are responsible for relocating, right? So actually picking up the devices themselves and then placing them back into their designated corrals, if you will, of where they're supposed to be located. Sure, ambassadors are capable of reaching out to a company, but more than likely they're not doing that. That's where we have, again, that contracted provider that's focused primarily and solely is to do just that, right, is to respond to those requests, proactively patrol, locate these scooters, and then making sure that they're placing them back in their corrals.
Yeah, I can imagine it will become very time consuming for block by block to do that, to take them back to the exact place. But I will say the people who are contracted to do it, there are lots of residents saying that they see them in the same place for 24 hours or longer. But it is good for disabled residents, for older adults, that they don't have to fall over an e-scooter in the middle of the sidewalk because you guys are out there doing the decent thing that the rider should have done and moving them aside. So thank you.
Commissioner Secretary, do we have any public comments for block by block?
We don't have any additional comments, public comments.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7D, the Public Safety Commission will debrief on a special meeting held on August 14th where various public safety equipment, technology, and security enhancements were discussed, and provide any additional comment and or recommendation to City Council to consider. And for all my fellow commissioners, this is a very important item for all of us. I know everyone is very concerned, and some wish we had had more time. So this is our opportunity to, make additional comments. I would just like to, hopefully in lieu of time, that we just keep it moving and be respectful of one another, because I'm sure most of us have something to contribute. So would anyone like to start?
Quick question. How are we going to do this? Are we going to be each voting on one thing, one item? Or how is this going to work?
Director Rivas.
How are we going to report back to City Council? How's that work?
No different than when we did have this item, right, go before this body and the City Council. So the Public Safety Commission, this is a second go around, as the chair had mentioned. And so any questions, any potential recommendations and input that you would like the City Council to be provided to consider when the item returns before them, which is scheduled to occur next month, will be included as a part of the staff report. So I did place 2 attachments to this staff report. The first attachment is just the same exact report that you all were provided back in August, but the second was a memo, and that memo came as a result of the input and feedback after presenting this item before the Social Justice Advisory Board, the LGBTQ+ Commission, and the Human Services Commission. And so if you kind of see and reference that format, that would be the idea. And the takeaway from here would be for you all to ask questions, for you to provide your recommendations. It wouldn't be in terms of you voting on a particular item. Of course, if that's what the commission wants to do in terms of supporting a particular item, you certainly could do that as well. But we're just kind of looking for a general overview of input and feedback from the commission, and then being able to summarize that, and then we will include that in the staff report that goes to the city council to consider.
Great, thank you, Director Rivas. So with that being said, are there any questions at this time, or concerns or comments that any commissioners would like to have added to the report?
Chair, if no one else does, I have just a couple of comments.
Sure, Commissioner Lowe.
Thank you. I had the opportunity at the session in August to ask basically all my questions, so I don't have really generally item by item questions, but more so overview. In general, with what we're looking at here, Danny, or Director Rivas rather, you know, we've got costs associated with each one of these items, and kind of overall, we're fixing a cost to any one of these items. And obviously this is very high level in nature. But, you know, are these costs quoted with some kind of plan in mind regarding like a year-long pilot project, or, you know, whether it be like the real-time watch center, you know, obviously some of the ballistic stuff is a one-time purchase, but you know, the fixed real-time cameras, any of these kinds of things, the drones as first responders, were they formulated with a particular time frame in mind?
They were, and so I'm just showing on the screen, right, and this is the first option that was in attachment A in the staff report that went before you all. So the first item is regarding the drone, the use of a drone, and so you can see kind of the estimated cost and timeline. So this is related to a one-year pilot program, and the estimate is at $250,000, and we of course acquired that a figure from speaking with the vendor that we've been in communication with, right? And so that would include, you know, the leasing of the equipment, training, the software, and all the communication and technology that goes into that they would have to essentially install at the West Hollywood Sheriff Station. And then that would include as well personnel working 40 hours a week. So all of it kind of varies. It depends. I know there's some of them, if I drill down, are mentioning more of like a 6-month as opposed to a year. Versus what you just mentioned, right? If it's the ballistic protection, then obviously that's an initial cost, right? And then there wouldn't be any ongoing maintenance as it relates to ballistic protection unless we decided to replace it. And I can't remember off the top of my head kind of the lifespan of the ballistic protection, but of course that's definitely something that, you know, the detailed information that we'll be able to plug in when we return to council.
Okay. Thank you. And for any of the items that have basically a heavy upfront capital cost that aren't just, you know, operations, maintenance, ongoing support, or even leasing of equipment that could very well be terminated at the end of a pilot, how does the recuperation of costs go at the end of a pilot should that pilot be chosen not to move forward with by City Council, for instance, the real-time watch center?
Yeah, so in terms of recouping the cost, there really isn't any recovery as it relates to that. It's an investment, but we wanted to place it as a pilot so that, you know, we'd be able to assess, right, the productivity and the effectiveness of it, and then be able to bring back that information to the city council, you know, for further consideration. We'll just use, you know, and mention as I'm working on the staff report that's actually going to be going to city council next month, because that's just around the corner. You know, the city of Beverly Hills, as we use them as an example, and we reflected on the staff report, they implemented their real-time watch center, right, the use of the drones, the fixed cameras, et cetera, back in June of last year. And so in June of this year, they essentially presented, the chief of the Beverly Hills Police Department presented an update to the Beverly Hills City Council, and it outlined, right, how crime has decreased, right, and the use of all of that technology. And so we would take that same approach. That was the idea that we would utilize in terms of bringing back, you know, a staff report to the City Council. Perhaps if City Council wished us to present the same information, which I'm sure we could do to the other bodies too, this body as well, to keep them informed about what's being presented and the effectiveness or not. But essentially, there wouldn't be any recovery, right? That would be an investment for that year. And the reason why we're looking at kind of the lease as opposed to purchasing some of these that you're seeing on there is for that reason, because if we decide not to move forward with it, and when I say we, I'm meaning the city council, if they decide not to move forward with a particular pilot program, then we could pull the plug, right? And we don't have that asset that is just going to sit there on the shelf, So that was the thought process in terms of kind of leasing the equipment.
Great. Okay. I'll come back again, but I don't know if anyone else has other questions.
Commissioner Nickel.
Thank you, Chair. As I mentioned in August, I'm unfortunately in favor of most of this. I say unfortunately because I can see how a lot of people would think it's creepy, but I think we live in a world where a lot of it's necessary. I think that Beverly Hills has shown that it can be very effective. I mentioned earlier about the murder suspect within about a week ago who was arrested within 30 minutes because of their real-time watch center. I did just want to make clear when it comes to the drones, I know that the ACLU has worried about routine surveillance. It is a response. It's not like we're going to have drones circling above West Hollywood filming everything all the time. This is an instance where something happens, there is a call made to the sheriff's station, and before an officer can get there, a drone could get there, and as was mentioned even earlier, say a person changes their outfit so that they can get away easier, or even just to see what they look like so that they have a description of the suspect, or if they're holding a gun or something that is not a gun. So this is the case, right? It is a responsive thing.
That is correct, Commissioner Nichols. So the recommendation it would be that that the use of the drone and even the fixed cameras would be on a reactive basis. And I will say that that is different from what the City of Beverly Hills approach is. So the City of Beverly Hills proactively monitors their cameras, and so they have folks that they've allocated in the real-time watch center, right, that are monitoring those fixed cameras. But in terms of the use of the drones, or fixed cameras, in terms of what's been included here, that would be as a result of a call for service. So the sheriff's station, to your point, receives a call, and then that drone is then deployed, right, to that call and that incident. If there happens to be fixed cameras there at that location, then that is something then that our deputies and staff in the dispatch center and the real-time watch center would be able to access. And in terms of utilizing both of those technologies, they would be able to then communicate to the responding deputies, right, in terms of what is going on in that particular instance. So that is what is being proposed in terms of how West Hollywood Sheriff Station would be utilizing this.
Thank you for making that clear. And then the other thing is there was a horrific scenario brought up at the meeting, if I remember correctly, and it was something along the lines of a woman leaves a red state, say Texas, where abortions are illegal, and they come to Southern California, and then someone in that state actually comes to us and asks for footage that had been recorded from a drone, just randomly, or a real-time fixed camera, and that footage can be used to prosecute her for something which is absolutely legal in our state. You can think of many different scenarios where that could happen if this is something that would move forward. Marijuana is illegal in a lot of places. There are places where being gay is illegal in other countries where it could be used. That is absolutely not the case, correct? There is something that we could put in place that makes it very clear that we would never turn over footage for anything that is legal in our city.
That's definitely something, Commissioner Nickel, that we would be able to work with the department on. And one of the things in our discussions kind of following that meeting in August, the special meeting, is that we would work with the department on establishing a policy that fits the needs of the West Hollywood community. And although the entire department, that wouldn't apply to the entire department, that could become a West Hollywood station order that could be put in place as it relates to the pilot program. And so we're still fleshing out, right, that approach. But I think that is something that could definitely address the concerns that you just described.
And there are concerns, and I think that it would be really good if we can make that very, very clear. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Vice Chair Saltzman.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any questions. The questions that I have been answered. But I'll make a stab at similar to what some commissioners and some council members did in August, and just identify things that I think make sense that we should go forward on, and things that I would either don't think make sense or should be secondary. So I'll just walk through them. I do think the proposal for the drones as first responders makes sense. We've seen it generates faster response times, gives better situational awareness to the deputies when they're responding. But having said that, just as Commissioner Nickel was just discussing, there are policies that need to be implemented to go along with that with respect to misuse of the drones and privacy. And so while I think we should go forward, I think we need to be clear that those policies need to be put into place. And I'm encouraged to hear that it would not necessarily be a Sheriff's Department-wide policy, but one that's appropriate here in West Hollywood. Second, I think the fixed real-time cameras make good sense for many of the same reasons. Same concern about the policies. Third, I think the real-time watch center would be quite valuable. If we're going to have cameras and we're going to have drones, the way to multiply their effectiveness, or one of the ways to do that, is with the real-time watch center. And so I would support that. I also support the high-speed vehicle chase alternative. There are serious safety issues with respect to high-speed chases, and we heard from the sheriff today that in a number of instances, the deputies themselves or the watch commanders call off the chase because of the dangerousness of the chase. And the alternative being presented here is one that would do away with the need of the actual high-speed chase, because we'd be following the car that we would be chasing otherwise. So I would be in support of that. Second to last, the emergency communication system, which is essentially an upgrade of Nixle, I think is long overdue. Nixle is helpful, but is very basic. And there's so much more information that we could gather and distribute through that proposal. And finally, on the positive side, I think the Polaris utility task vehicle for major events makes sense. We have so many significant major events here where that utility task vehicle could be extremely helpful. On the other side of the ledger, I don't see current need or value for the gunshot detection system, and I don't think I would be in favor of the body-worn cameras for block-by-block ambassadors. What that leaves then is there are 4 proposals regarding city facilities: the proactive monitoring, the ballistic protection, the weapon detection, and the visitor management system. And for some of those, the staff recommended gathering more community input. And I think for all 4 of those, I think it would make sense to gather more community input before moving forward on those. I do think they would be, I just think there are going to be a lot of different opinions about them, and I think we need to be clear about what those are and what benefit we're going to get from those if we actually go ahead and do them. So those are my thoughts about the proposals, and I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Extremely helpful, Vice Chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Freiberg.
Just a couple things. As for the drones, the Sheriff's Department already has drones that they can use at any time for emergencies. I think one of the things Captain Mulder had mentioned when asked at that special meeting was, are you going to use it for anything else? And he said, well, yeah, public safety issues. That could be anything. You know, that doesn't have to be like a first response. And let's say it is a first response. It's not stopping crime. They're just showing up afterwards. So there is no empirical evidence, and I wish there was, that showed that they're effective in lowering crime, stopping crime, or saving lives. As for Beverly Hills, you know, I mean, that could be a misleading correlation. Maybe that one time it did work, but there just isn't the evidence to really support it. And the chance that they could misuse the data is so great. And there's no regulations because they basically want to control the whole thing. And Captain Mulder had mentioned that as well at the meeting, that they were going to be in charge of everything. But it's so important for City Council to regulate that, and which I did mention during that, that meeting. The other thing, same thing with real-time fixed cameras. I mean, yeah, they're going to move cameras around, but are they going to all of a sudden say, oh, a drug dealer lives over here in this apartment building? Puts it up at the apartment building, now it's watching there every day. I mean, you just don't know, and I think this goes along with the, you know, they could misuse the data as well. You know, I mean, they are going to be dealing with private companies. They're going to be getting all the data usage, checking it over. They could do anything with it. They can, you know, if you read any of the studies from the ACLU, they could just use AI companies. They could go on Facebook. They could look at, you know, facial recognition with all of this. So I don't think, it just doesn't outweigh the privacy issue. I just think the invasion of privacy is just too costly, and you can't turn back once this starts. The other thing I wanted to mention, I'm just going to go through really quick. The gunshot detection, which I agree with Commissioner Salzman, I think there's just serious concerns over the accuracy of it, and for them to hear maybe a gun, not a gunshot, a car backfiring, you know, fireworks, anything. Now you have officers going to a situation thinking there's an active shooter. And the problem with that is they're going in there with a certain frame of mind, and they're going to be on high alert. Well, guess what happened in Chicago? A 13-year-old boy was killed because of something like this. So I definitely don't think we need it. We don't really have shootouts in our city, thank God. And then I think block by block cameras. I wish we had heard more from block by block about this, but I guess they're okay with it. And it's free, so I guess you could use it as a learning tool. I don't see anyone really saying they don't want it. And then I think all of the city weapon detection and all of that, it seems like it's protecting a lot of just city staff and not so much the public, but I think that's something the city should really deal with on their own. You know, like, do you think this is necessary? I'm not sure how the money is divvied up, but I feel like it would be more of a city's decision than our decision and maybe our residents' decision. And I think that, and for the UTV, that sounds really fun. I guess it's good, I don't know. But that's it, that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Aramian.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to keep this really brief. Back in August, I was pretty much in favor of all the recommendations, and I am still in favor of all of the items except for a few. And I just want to go through them really quick. I know a couple of my colleagues on the commission are not all happy about having drones or cameras, but I feel unfortunately times have changed in our society right now, and there is no privacy in our world right now. If we walk down the street, go to Target, you know, either the city of Los Angeles, They know exactly when you're going inside Target, when you're going into your car, when you're exiting your vehicle. Unfortunately, there is no such thing as privacy in our society anymore. So I'd rather be safe. I'd rather our community be safe. I'd rather these technological equipment be used to help protect us, protect our children, protect our grandparents, protect everyone who is living in our society right now, because times are changing. So in regards to a drone as a first responder, yes, I'm in favor for that, because I'd rather have a drone respond to a situation call, analyze it, triage it, and know what needs to be done, what tools, what other deputies need to respond. And sometimes a drone will respond to these situations quicker than a patrol car going from the east side to the west side or vice versa. Moving forward, fixed reel cameras, yes, I would love all the cameras to be installed in West Hollywood. It's working for Beverly Hills. Like Detective Rivas said, these will not be on 24/7, but they can tap into it to see what's going on. I was driving through Beverly Hills yesterday or the day before. I was on Olympic, and there's cameras everywhere. There are signs, red light camera. There's signs you're being videotaped. You look up the light poles, there's cameras. There's also like a big generator with the red and blue lights flashing. You're being recorded at the intersections. When you see that, you think twice about doing something in that city because you know you're being watched. If West Hollywood has that, I hope it'll deter most of the crime that happens here in West Hollywood. Gunshot detection, I'm going to pass on that. I don't think that's something we need. You know, we really don't have that much gunshot situations arriving here in West Hollywood. A real-time watch center, yes, to overlook the drones and all the cameras. Body-worn cameras for block by block, I believe they should wear that. They make just as many contacts with businesses, unhoused, everyone in the community. If our sheriff's department are going to wear it and are wearing it, I think block by block should wear it. It'll be beneficial in litigations. It'll be beneficial not only for block by block, but also for the city of West Hollywood. I just feel that we talk about privacy, but the more we talk about privacy, our crime rates are going up. So I'm all for privacy. Let's figure out what those privacy deals are going to be. I don't feel cameras are going to be going into our bedrooms and watching us have intimate moments with our partners or anything like that, or watching a drug dealer, you know, weighing out his product and selling it. You know, I believe in privacy like that. But when it comes to public roadways and streets, unfortunately, there is no such thing as privacy. If we're living on those streets, I'd rather be safe and make sure that people are being watched and protected. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. My comments, I'm going to piggyback on some of the comments of some of my fellow commissioners, but I'm going to start with an acronym, CCTV. If you've ever been to Europe, CCTV is everywhere. And I've never heard any of my friends that live in Europe complain about it, nor have I had any of my friends in the LGBTQ+ community say they've been outed because of CCTV. It is an important deterrent, and it is an important method used for tracking an unfortunate situation. Also, privacy. If you have one of these, guess what? You don't have a right to privacy because your phone is always listening to you. I am very much in favor of the drones. I think they will be a tremendous aid to our sheriff's department, especially as Lieutenant Lapkin mentioned, if a perpetrator is changing clothing, a drone may pick up on that faster. I'm in favor of fixed cameras, real-time watch center, block by block, having cameras, because since they seem to be under the microscope, and since so many people are grumbling about block by block, maybe it's a good thing to have. Also, gunshot detection. I'm just curious, What terrifies me the most in our 1.9-mile city, and every square inch of this city needs to be protected, but our busiest area is the Rainbow District. In Orlando, Pulse, Colorado Springs, those were isolated bars. I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. We are bar after bar after bar after bar. What's going to happen, God forbid, if we do have an attack and someone's running down the street as a spree killer? So could the gunshot detection be an important tool? I was in New York on September 11th. That completely changed my perspective on a lot of this. And yes, as one of my commissioners said, we are living in very different times, and we need to be vigilant, we need to be smart, and we need to be ahead of the criminal element. So I stand behind many of these items, and I would love to see them moved forward. Commissioner Harrison.
Just basically echoing what I think's been said. I think I'm definitely in favor of the drone. I do believe block by block cameras, it's great. I know that that's not data that we get without requesting it, and that would all have to be, I assume, worked out along the same lines that the sheriff deals with that data. Real-time watch center just seems to make sense. I mean, whether it's the drone technology or the cameras, fixed cameras, I think you're going to have that one spot where things are being reviewed and viewed, especially in light of the sheriff's comments earlier about people going into policing. And I think that we need to aid our law enforcement with technology that's available and being widely used in safe and responsible ways.
Commissioner Freiberg.
Just wanted to make one more comment. As to the privacy issue, it's very different if you're holding your phone and you're out in public compared to getting caught on a camera that the sheriff's department is going to go through and study that footage and keep it and study it and keep it. And, like I said, it could be misused anywhere. There's cameras everywhere. There's cameras, the smash and grabs are happening every day. And what do you see? You see all of their images. I mean, and they still couldn't find who they were. So I think, it's very different from Target having enclosed caption TV on you all day as compared to someone who's sitting there studying it, and it could be misused. And that's where I was coming from.
Commissioners, any other comments before we move on?
I do, please.
All right.
Thank you. I guess I would just generally say, to wrap up my kind of comments and thoughts on this is, I think in general we have to balance our advancement of technology, especially for public safety and these kinds of items, with privacy. As my fellow commissioners are saying, it's hard to and impossible to expect complete privacy in the modern era, whether it be at home or in public. But I think that every step that a city or a body might take towards advancing that, adding fuel to the fire, or throwing another bucket of water into the ocean, still should be done with some thought and some care about the edge cases, which is, I think, what we're trying to do here. And there is a massive difference between like CCTV, closed circuit TV, and cloud connected cameras. The edge cases that a lot of us are maybe voicing, or at least I hold in concern with these, are related to the bad actors, someone who shouldn't have access to the camera data, to whatever data is being collected, this huge trove of data that would be collected under any different of these means here. And so it's much different, and I would recommend we do so with care. Director Rivas, you mentioned potentially they were looking at a station order for some of these sheriff-related or kind of contained items. Question, what is the enforceability of like a station order and like transparency of it or oversight?
I don't, yeah, I know it's something that I've been speaking with the captain of the West Hollywood Sheriff Station about, so I don't want to misspeak, right, in terms of kind of the accountability, but anytime, I'm assuming, and Lieutenant Lapkin, I don't know if you have any information that you could add, but I'm assuming that, you know, when there is a station order, that essentially is a policy that's in place at that time for that particular station, and so it would follow the same process that any other policy would follow, right, in terms of if a deputy didn't follow that, then obviously there's a progressive disciplinary process that the station would follow as it relates to that.
Okay. Because that'll be interesting to consider as well, right? And I think that'll echo some of the city council's concerns and those that were raised here as well. Next question. You know, all these items are really, really underbaked, to borrow the city council member's term. And there definitely wasn't guidance for them to necessarily be, quote, like fully baked before coming around to the commissions. But with December on our heels, which of these items, do you know which of these items are going to go before city council?
So all of the items are expected to go back before the council. I would suggest to the commission, similarly to what Vice Chair Saltzman and some of the other commissioners offered, if they feel comfortable in terms of kind of going down the list of items and, you know, making recommendations in support or not in support, which would be helpful as I'm, you know, taking notes and kind of tabulating all that. That would be helpful for me to summarize and provide to the city council. And so they, you know, the city council the council members did go through the list as well, if you all recall, and kind of went through that. And so what we intend to do is bring more concrete numbers as it relates to these items. You know, the concentration was more to focus on the council chambers and city hall as opposed to our recreational facilities that were included with some of the other kind of city facility enhancements. And so that'll be kind of our focus, is kind of narrowing that down a little bit. And then I will share with the commission that I intend to provide some visuals of these types of technologies and equipment, right? So I think there's nothing better than to see a picture of exactly what it is, right, that is being referred to, so that even members of the community as well could get a sense of it.
Director Rivas, so are you suggesting that as a commission we go through each item and make our recommendation?
You could. I mean, I think Vice Chair Saltzman did it very efficiently. It didn't take that long. I have everybody's comments. I think, aside from, I have some notes right now from Commissioner Blau, and I think Commissioner Nickel, I haven't heard yet, maybe kind of summarizing if you feel comfortable or not. But I think from the rest of the commission, I already have a good sense of the items that they spoke about. It doesn't have to be every item. You don't have to speak about every item, but whatever you feel comfortable in terms of communicating would be helpful.
Well, I made my individual recommendations.
You did.
On the items that I'm comfortable with. Commissioners, does anyone else want to?
Sorry, I can make it very clear. So I am in favor of the drones, the real-time fixed cameras, the real-time watch center, the proactive monitoring, visitor management system, Polaris UTV. Some of the other ones, I'm the block-by-block cameras. You know, I'm sort of either way. But the one other thing I will say is January 6th. We've all seen a lot of footage from January 6th, and we've seen a lot of really bad people arrested. So a lot of that footage was just people recording themselves on cameras and putting it out there. But there were body cameras from police officers. There was public cameras, CCTV, all sorts of things that helped to put a lot of bad people behind bars. Thank you.
Great. Any other commissioners that would like to quickly go through their recommendations if they have any? Commissioner Ramian?
Director Reeves, I think I already went through some of my list of items, so that's on the record as well.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, Commission Secretary, do we have any public comments on this item?
We don't have any public comments on this item.
Okay, great. So, Director Rivas, I think we're good. We've all had the opportunity to weigh in, which is what everyone wanted. Do you have everything that you need from us?
I do, if the commission feels comfortable in terms of what they conveyed this evening. I think we're good.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, moving on to new business. Item 8A, the Public Safety Commission will receive an update on the draft West Hollywood Target Vision Zero Action Plan. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Fenn, Senior Planner in the Long Range Planning Division.
David, you need to pull your mic down a little and lean in. They're a little temperamental.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Fenn, Senior Planner in the Long Range Planning Division here, with an update on Vision Zero. Danny, are you able to bring up the slides?
Yeah, I am working on it. Just give me a second. It's pulling up on the laptop.
Go ahead, Fudge. You can keep talking.
So I do have a brief presentation I can go through on some of the highlights if you would like. Would the Commission like a presentation on this?
Yes.
All right. So next slide, please. This is just the agenda. And next slide again, sorry. And again. So Vision Zero is the council-directed initiative to move towards reducing and ultimately eliminating severe and fatal traffic fatalities and crashes in the city. It was a council directive back in February of 2021. We've been working, it was disrupted a little bit by the pandemic, but we've been working with a consultant and a task force and appointed from various commissions to look into approaches for the city to address that, developing an action plan that can kind of guide those efforts. Vision Zero is kind of a broader national and international movement that the city is joining, a recognition that our infrastructure and enforcement and other factors play a role in collisions, and they are preventable. Next slide, please. So we've been working with a team of consultants at DKS and Urban Logic. We've had some input already from County Fire and Sheriff. We hope to meet with them again soon on these recommendations. We've also been to several other boards and commissions, including Transportation Commission, Older Adults Advisory Board, Disabilities Advisory Board, as well as a task force with representatives from each of the commissions. There was also an online outreach component through the social pinpoint platform. There was a map where people could post safety concerns in different parts of the city and categorize them, and that was incorporated into this analysis. Next slide, please. One more. So this is a just overall map of where, first of all, I should back up. We looked at historic traffic collision data that comes directly from the police reports generated by the sheriff in our case. Those go up to a statewide database and they come back down to us. We use the statewide database for purposes of ensuring that the data is comparable year over year. But we looked at 5 years of collision data in West Hollywood. In that time, there were 4 fatal collisions and 78 severe injury collisions from a total of over 3,000. And as you can see in the map, they're fairly clustered along, busy commercial corridors, larger intersections, with a few others they're much less concentrated in other areas, but they are also at other intersections throughout the city. Next slide, please. Not protected by the 2-ton vehicle that a driver is, for example. Fully 40% of them involve pedestrians, 10% involve bicycles, and 24% motorcycles. Next slide, please. Though they were a much, much smaller factor in terms of primary collision factors, we're also looking at a focus on crashes that involve speeding or impaired driving, because those may also be factors in other collisions, but if they're not the primary factor, they wouldn't show up in the data that way. Next slide, please. And then finally, because of the nature of the kind of urban environment that we're in, the vast majority of crashes in West Hollywood were at intersections rather than mid-block. It's really just sort of a reflection of the type of urban environment we find ourselves in. Next slide, please. So looking at that kind of overall picture, we came up with some systemic things that the city can do over time to try to reduce prevent the crashes in the first place or reduce the severity of them when they do occur. One thing we're looking at is potentially lowering speed limits throughout the city. This is something that in the past we didn't have legislative authority to do, but there is recent state legislation that provides more flexibility on this, and a key provision of that legislation goes into effect next June. So we'll be looking, it allows for essentially very modest speed limit reductions, which may seem insignificant, if a commercial corridor goes from 35 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour, for example. But when we get into traffic collision, the chances of someone, especially a pedestrian, surviving a crash goes up dramatically with just a small difference like that. It's actually an exponential curve, the severity there. And then a residential street might go from, say, 25 to 20. The map there shows, again, the fatal and severe collision concentrations overlaid with the darker lines or the higher speed limit streets. And you can see there's definitely a correlation of many of the severe crashes happening in areas that are higher speed limits. But obviously we know that people don't necessarily follow speed limits at all times. In rush hour, they may be going quite slowly, but late at night, they might be going faster. There are things we can do with infrastructure that make it physically more difficult and psychologically more difficult to drive at higher speeds. So we would pair that with an expansion of traffic calming, things like bulb outs and traffic circles, raised crosswalks where they make sense, and expanding bike lanes, as the council has already directed us to do in other programs. Next slide, please. Some of the other things we're looking at are signal modifications, for example. So we have these already in some intersections, but things like a leading pedestrian interval gives pedestrians a head start when a light changes. Those have been shown to reduce the incidence of crashes because motorists can, when the pedestrian's already in the intersection, when they get the green light, they can see them. So there's less chance of them hitting them. Expanding those to more locations. There may be a few locations in the city where it makes sense to even look at all direction scramble crosswalks. Other cities have those. We have a part-time one in the Rainbow District, but perhaps some of those could become full-time. They do have a traffic impact because if you're allowing pedestrians to move in all directions, you're not allowing cars to move in any directions. But for certain intersections, there may be still warranted, perhaps, and especially as we see increased development in some of those same intersections, or in the future potentially Metro Rail. There may be something that we might not look at right away, but that down the line we look to start implementing. Another thing that the city's already been doing, but we recommend continuing, is expanding in-roadway warning lights for crosswalks that are not at signals. That's when you push a button and the crosswalk flashes to alert motorists. So continuing to expand those citywide, and even just things like refreshing striping, and as we replace signals, replacing them with retroreflective backplates. That's the image there with the yellow outline on the signal. When you have inclement weather, or just kind of as a motorist is going around a turn, it draws their eye to the signal sooner, and they've been proven to have a modest reduction in the incidence of crashes, as well as upgrading where we can bike lanes to protected bike lanes, as the council has directed us to do. Next slide, please. So in addition to kind of citywide improvements, we also took a look at where we might focus specific infrastructure improvements on intersections where there were high incidence of crashes in the historic data that we analyzed. When we looked at the raw data, there was both Fountain and Melrose came up quite often. But because those streets are already being majorly retrofitted with many safety improvements, Melrose is completely under construction right now, and we'll have many new pedestrian safety features when it's done, and Fountain is being analyzed for a lane reduction that'll be followed by sidewalk widening and curb extensions. We held them apart from our kind of priority list with the hope that this plan can identify other locations for safety improvements, but that doesn't mean that we're abandoning those streets by any means. We would come back and evaluate them after those current improvements are done to see if anything else is needed. But the other locations there you can see are largely along Santa Monica, Sunset, as well as one location on Robertson and one on Doheny that came up in the historic collision data. Next slide, please. The next few slides are just summaries of the input we got from the online outreach tool, which we promoted in person as well. But we got over 400 comments from the community on, bicycle safety concerns, pedestrian safety concerns, vehicle safety concerns, and these following slides just show where those comments were along the different kind of key corridors. So on this one for Sunset, for example, we had a lot of pedestrian concerns, kind of mid-city around Holloway and Sherbourne. And fewer comments on the east side, but really a range of different types of comments, vehicle safety concerns and others, as well as bicycle and pedestrian. Next slide, please. Fountain Avenue, really a extremely wide mix of comments all over the corridor, which I think reflects what anyone that spends a lot of time walking or biking or driving on Fountain knows is it's currently a very unsafe corridor, and we're aware of that, and certainly these comments reflected that, but we're hopeful that the city's existing project there will address many of those concerns. Next slide, please. Santa Monica Boulevard, lots of kind of hotspots here. Some of them, kind of on the west side of the city around, the bars, as well as, mid-city at major intersections like Fairfax. Again, all kinds of different comments here with, perhaps a heavier emphasis on pedestrian concerns and general safety concerns, but, nothing too surprising. Next slide, please. And then Melrose, really two kind of peaks, one at La Cienega and one towards Robertson on the west side. But again, all sorts of concerns here, and this one's kind of a tough one because we did this survey right as the construction was starting there, so I don't really know how representative it is for Melrose. But again, we'll be coming back to those corridors and evaluating them after the current improvements are done. Next slide, please. So I don't have slides for all of the individual locations. They are in the packet where we have the full draft plan, and I can go into any of them if you'd like. But this is an example of what our recommendations for each of the kind of key locations looks like in the draft plan. So at Santa Monica La Brea, which was the kind of #1 hotspot citywide, there were 43 total crashes in the 5 years of data we analyzed. 4 of them were fatal or severe injury crashes. Some of them involved pedestrians, some of them involved motorcycles. In the outreach, so in the public comments, there were a lot of comments about bicycle and pedestrian safety concerns at this location. And then here we're looking at, certainly upgrades, the retroflective backplates, those kind of simpler things, but possibly other things like delineators, the vertical plastic elements along the median to prevent left turns that can be hazardous and impacting vehicles that are traveling north-south in La Brea, as well as possibly installing a leading pedestrian interval, which is giving pedestrians the head start there. And, some additional analysis needs to be done on the scrambles because of that traffic impact that I mentioned, but this is a location that, at some time in the future may warrant that if the council is amenable to that trade-off in terms of what we get back to them in terms of the traffic impacts. Next slide, please. One thing that we are also including in the plan is just a reflection of the equity context, since we are recommending improvements around the city. Kind of a best practice is to mention the relative need. This is also something that's considered in many grant applications at the state level and regionally. So to the extent that we can identify improvements that are needed in areas that are considered higher need in those indices, they may be eligible for outside funding. So as you might expect, the east side of the city, where there's more multifamily housing and denser areas, come up more often in those sort of indices as high need. So improvements there may be able to get funding under those things. That's not to say that we wouldn't do improvements in other parts of the city, but we're just making the council and the community aware of those different characteristics, and those could inform future grant applications. So rather than kind of invent a new definition of what is an equity need for a plan like this, we used Metro's Equity Needs Index, which is kind of it's applied to regional projects and grant programs that Metro administers, and it's fairly similar to other statewide indices, but we're including it in the plan for each of our recommended locations. Next slide, please. One more. So this is where we are. We had a series of workshops with the task force over the last year, as well as presentations to a number of boards and commissions. We've gone through the development of these draft recommendations, starting with existing conditions and needs analysis, and we're now speaking to you guys today. We're going to be out at the community at a part of a wider citywide mobility pop-up that you'll start seeing announcements soon for later this month on November 27th. And then we hope to have a draft plan to the council on December 18th. There will likely be other pop-ups between now and then for in-person outreach on this, but we don't have dates for those yet. On the right are just some of the kind of statewide and federal grant opportunities for implementing the kind of recommendations that we have in this plan that the city might pursue, but we haven't made any decisions on them yet. Those are just the kind of things that we want to have this plan in place in order to be eligible for. Next slide, please. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and really any feedback you have would be helpful so we can make some final tweaks and include those in the presentation to the City Council.
Yes, thank you. I actually have two. The fatality metrics, is that only for individuals in vehicles, or does that include pedestrians that are hit?
You mean the number of fatal collisions?
Yes, the fatalities, yes. Does it include both?
It's both. If someone died as a result of the collision, it's a fatal issue. However, there is if they weren't dead on the scene but were in the hospital for a while afterwards and happened later, it may not be captured in the police report that this data draws from, but in that case it would be counted as a severe injury, if that makes sense. But yes, a pedestrian that is hit and killed would count as a fatal collision.
And then the other thing I want to mention that I think needs addressing, the crosswalk intersections on Fountain, I think have been amazing. However, when staff gave us the speed report, the east side of Fountain did not warrant a speed reduction, which I struggle to understand why, because I live on the east side. I walk on Fountain when I'm walking my dog, and I see vehicles gunning it when they cross La Brea and Fountain when they're traveling east, because it goes from a single lane to 2 lanes. So the crosswalks two in particular that I can speak on, Detroit and Fountain, and Formosa and Fountain. As great as they are, I don't know how effective the lighting is for vehicles and being able to see the lighting, because I watch individuals press the button and wait for vehicles to stop. The lights are flashing in the street, but cars are still fleeting through the intersection. So is there something additional that can be added to that? I saw a father pushing a stroller trying to cross Fountain, and vehicles just kept coming. I was amazed. And I know during the day, at night, the lighting is quite bright because it's dark. During the day, I think it is harder for vehicles to see the lighting because of the sun, the reflection, those types of elements. So how can we improve this?
So a few things on that. One, I think you're referring to the speed survey that recently came, where the city's recommending some reductions. That was done under the existing regulations. Our hope is that after the additional flexibility that comes into effect in June, that we may be able to lower the speed limit on, the other half of Fountain as well, with that additional authority from the state. In terms of the specific crosswalks on Fountain, we're in the process of redesigning Fountain right now with the Protect the Bike Lane project, which will also, include curb extensions and other things. So I can definitely take that back to the project team for those specific locations. In terms of what can be done for crosswalks that already have the light up treatment, but that, that may not be sufficient. There is, it's not done often, but they can be upgraded to full traffic signals. That was done on Santa Monica Boulevard in several places a few years back. So that's something the city can look at. Depending on the street, there's the potential for raised crosswalks as well. They could still have the flashers. They're generally not, the fire department has kind of final say on what sort of treatments we put in that may, slow their response time. So for example, like speed lumps on side streets typically have gaps at the width of a fire engine's wheel so that they can continue without being slowed down by them, but regular motorists are. They have accepted raised crosswalks in some locations, but it's, I don't want to promise and say that we could do that on Fountain, because it is kind of a location by location discretionary conversation with the fire prevention folks at County Fire, but it is something that can be looked at. Other things, the city can look at curb extensions that reduce the distance that people have to cross. So perhaps the sidewalk is widened, at the edges of crosswalks. Maybe there's a parking space that's taken away on either side or something to allow that reduced crossing distance. Those are probably more likely to be accepted in a corridor like Fountain than a raised crosswalk would be. But generally, I think Fountain, if the Protect the Bike Lane project is built, which will result in there will no longer be a 2-lane section. It'll no longer be a 4-lane section. There'll only be 2 lanes all the way across, so that issue you're describing where motorists speed up should be alleviated by that project anyways. But I'll definitely relay the concerns with those specific crosswalks to the project team and see if there's anything else we can include as part of that project.
Yeah, and an incident did happen prior to the crosswalks being put in, but I saw my neighbor's body lying in the street covered with a sheet. I don't want to see that again.
Totally understand. Right there with you.
Vice Chair Saltzman.
Thank you. Similar to the chair, I just want to point out a couple other intersections that I don't think you mentioned and I'd like to call your attention to. They're both in the Norman Triangle area where I happen to live. You do talk about Doheny and Phyllis, and there is now a relatively new crosswalk at Doheny and Elevado. Both of them, I think, warrant at least a flashing red light when the button is pushed. I walk there every day, and cars just ignore the flashing lights that are there. Whether it needs to be a full stop light or not, I don't know, but at least a flashing red light at Doheny and Phyllis and Doheny and Elevado. Also, the area of the Norman Triangle, Hilldale, which is a street that has about 6 stop signs on it between Santa Monica Boulevard and Cynthia. And by my accounting, the vast majority of people don't stop at most of those stop signs. There's now a flashing light on the stop sign at Keith and Hilldale, but Hilldale and Norma, Hilldale and Dix, Hilldale and Vista Grande, you take your life in your hands if you assume someone's going to stop at the stop sign. And I would encourage you to take a look at those. Thank you.
Thank you. Will do.
Commissioners, anyone else? Questions? Mayor Raymond?
Yes. Thank you for your presentation. I just have one question. Does your statistics also include scooters, or is it just bicycles and motorcycles and cars?
So the categories that we report on in the report come directly from the statewide database, which is pulled from the from individual police reports, and that database doesn't include scooter is not a category that's like already built into that database. When there's an individual, if there's an individual collision that results in a police report, we can we can request the actual, detailed police report and get into, was it a scooter or not, if that's a topic of interest, but that's not one of the overall categories that we're able to easily summarize. But I know we do collect data on collisions, on scooters generally as part of the scooter project, but not in the police report data that this is based off of.
Because I would love to know how many, fatalities or how many serious injuries have been involved with a vehicle either hitting a scooter or a scooter hitting a vehicle or a scooter hitting a pedestrian. Is there any way to get that data so we can see what that number looks like?
I can follow up with my colleague who handles the scooter program for the city and see what data we have available, and we can certainly work with Danny to get that information to you. But I will caution, I think it's more limited than what we have on these other categories.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nickel?
Thank you, Chair. David, thank you for the presentation. Following up on Commissioner Aramian's question, I was surprised too that there wasn't more information about e-scooters in this. I will point out, I did want to say that it actually did say, you did make mention of scooters at one point where it says that those riding scooters may not be fully experienced and familiar with the vehicle operations. Additionally, some electronic scooters can travel at speeds faster than typical pedestrian and bicycle travel. Because of these factors, crashes involving scooters have the potential to result in serious injuries or fatalities. Are we talking about the riders of the scooters or the pedestrians into which they would run?
That was just a characterization of the environment of someone riding a scooter, the nature of the lended scooter model. Potentially, they could result in either.
Yeah. Okay. As you say, there's not that 2 tons of protection around a scooter or a bicyclist or a pedestrian as there is for somebody in a car. Your presentation makes it clear that pedestrians are the most vulnerable people in the streets. So I'm really glad that as part of what we're looking at on Fountain, it is widening sidewalks. I think some of the portions there are not ADA compliant even at this point. So that's certainly something that needs to be looked at. The most dangerous intersection being Santa Monica and La Brea does not shock me at all. I think the scramble? The scramble idea is a really good idea there. The one over by UCLA Medical Center in Westwood, if you're a pedestrian, it gives you a lot more options. And if you're a driver, it forces your awareness to have people walking in all sorts of ways around you. So I think it would certainly be something that I hope is looked at a lot more closely. Also circles. The circles. There are several in residential areas, like over at Detroit and Formosa. I think they're really helpful. I think that we should look at more of them at different intersections in the city, like at Spalding and Norton in residential areas, because people do. Things get busy on Santa Monica, they get busy on Fountain, they come into our residential areas, and if they can go pretty fast along there. That can slow things down, as well as speed bumps, which we have in certain parts of the city. I think those were the main things I had. Thank you very much.
Before we move on to public comments, I just had another question. At Orange and Santa Monica near Whole Foods, and then further west between, let's say, La Cienega and San Vicente, they're overhead crossing intersections. And I noticed they seem to be more effective than the lights that are embedded in the streets. I think we're just more geared, obviously because of traffic lights, to look up. People don't seem to understand that there are lights in the street. So I'm just curious, is there a way to explore why in certain areas those types of crossing lights were implemented and not in others, like, for example, at Green Acre in Santa Monica where Whole Foods is? It's embed in the streets, but I believe an above headlight would be far more beneficial.
So I totally picture what you're saying, and I think the answer is that our public works team has been kind of experimenting with these over time. So the latest ones that they're installing are kind of you could look at it as like a yes and approach. They're both the in-roadway lights, but also vertical lights on poles. So for example, I believe they just did an upgrade to the one on, either they just did or are about to do one on Crescent Heights that incorporates both. So looking forward, I think that's their current model. If there's,
but I'm not talking about vertical, I'm talking about across the intersection lights. At Orange and at several of the other streets, when you're traveling west on La Cienega, the lights go across the street.
Like on a mast arm you're talking
Yes.
about? Understood. I'm not sure why they use those versus the posts on the sign, but I can certainly ask and get back to you. It may have to do with the size of the street. Santa Monica versus Crescent Heights, it's a larger
Yeah,
street.
but they did it at Orange in Santa Monica, but they didn't do it at Green Acre in Santa Monica. So it's not making sense to me. And yeah, I understand you might want to try different things, but I'm not one that's big on experimenting with public safety. And the traffic circles, as Commissioner Nichols mentioned, are great. However, we seem to have a misunderstanding when vehicles are traveling through that when there's a stop sign means stop. And again, going back to European cities, traffic circles are typically larger. So you don't have stop signs. The vehicle in the intersection has the right of way, but our circles are much smaller, so we need stop signs. So I think we need to figure out an effective way to get vehicles to stop, because they don't stop on Formosa, they don't stop on Detroit, and these are residential areas. People live there. And we don't have enough traffic cops to sit and cite on a regular basis. I wish we did, because when the deputy is out there, he's busy.
Thank you for that feedback. Definitely agree that it's a problem that people don't stop. And one on our list is actually to work with the sheriff department and look at what are the enforcement options that are available to complement the infrastructure recommendations of this plan. Some of the things we're already thinking about are meeting with them more regularly, specifically on Vision Zero and how the implementation is going, so we can adjust over time. But that's certainly something we can bring to them, is what are our options for stop enforcement.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Secretary, do we have a public comment on this agenda item?
Yes, we do have one public comment. Kevin Burton, if you want to approach the podium.
Good evening, I'm Kevin Burton, resident of West Hollywood. And just to respond to Commissioner Nichols' question at the recent council discussion of the scooter program, data was provided showing that there were a total of 3 collisions between pedestrians and scooters since its inception, and the 3 reports to the Sheriff's Department, and at least 1 involved an injury. That's out of about 500,000 rides, 3 total. So they're not very common. I just wanted to thank staff for all their work on the Vision Zero program. It's a very comprehensive and well-written plan. There are a few points that need attention, and these are just to quickly go over. Page Roman numeral 4, table of contents. There is a listing at page 27, and then the next page is 14. I think it's a duplicate, should be deleted. On page 32, location 2, Santa Monica Boulevard and Crescent Heights. The line begins with install bicycle detection, but bicycle detection is mentioned nowhere in the report. I think that's a mistake in that line on page 32. I do recommend that the report mention bicycle detection, and what that means is traffic signals detect bicycles in the same way they detect vehicles, which at most intersections is not the case in the city. The bike can wait there till the cows come home and it'll never change, in which case they just give up and go through the red light. It'd be better to have bicycle detection and fairer. And finally, on the maps from public feedback for the priority corridors, there aren't enough of the cross streets actually shown on those maps corresponding to the peaks of public comments. Like there are a lot of comments at Kings Road, and I know there are issues there, and Kings Road isn't shown. Likewise, on Fountain Avenue, there is a big spike. I think it's at Poinsettia, the signal there. I'm not sure because the road is not shown. Please add more of those at every spike in those maps. A couple of general suggestions, and these are points that were already made in the report, but I think should be emphasized. I too very much like the pedestrian scrambles, and I think the considerations of traffic flow should definitely be secondary to pedestrian and bicycle safety. And I would like to see at least different phases for pedestrians, which includes bikes, because bikes can move with pedestrians, and vehicles at every major intersection on Santa Monica Boulevard, including La Brea, Fairfax, Crescent Heights, La Cienega, San Vicente, and Robertson. All of those should have those. Robertson has in the evening now and some nights. There, for commissioners' information, this Wednesday, Transportation Commission will be discussing installation of a pedestrian scramble at La Brea Avenue. So if you want to find out more, attend the Transportation Commission, and I hope those discussions expand to these other intersections. Well, finally, I think that the speed should be reduced on all arterials from 35, currently on several arterials, to 30 miles per hour, once city has the legal authority to do so in June. And these changes would, by reducing speed, would reduce severity of crashes, as David mentioned earlier, and that is the primary focus of any Vision Zero plan.
I'm sorry, your time is up. We had it up on the screen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's my period.
Sure, thanks.
Before we move on, Commissioner Nichols, did you have a question on this item?
Oh, no, I just wanted to, there was one other thing I wanted to add, is distracted driving. I don't know, there wasn't a whole lot of data as far as what caused the fatal accidents, what caused the serious injury accidents, but I do notice that even now, people are on their phones constantly when they're driving, even when they're walking. People will walk into an intersection without even looking up from their phone, right in front of cars, which is not good. So it might make sense for the city to do some sort of public awareness campaign about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 8B, the Public Safety Commission will receive an update regarding the city's local hazard mitigation plan. And just a reminder to all commissioners, including myself, at the end of the presentations, we should stick to questions, and then at the end of the meeting, we will have time for our individual commissioner comments. Good evening.
Well, good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, and member of the public. I would like to first and foremost thank you all for having us this evening and for all that you do for city staff and our community. My name is Margarita Kostanovich, and I am the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of West Hollywood. Across from us is Director Rivas, who has continuously provided great support in the success of the local hazard mitigation plan. I hope you all read it, all of over 100 pages. The city's Community Safety Department is working with Jacob Green and Associates to complete an updated version of the plan on focusing on furthering the action needed to reduce the impact of local and global hazards impacting the city and reaffirm that West Hollywood as a vibrant, sustainable, and resilient city for current and future generations. Jacob Green Associate is a comprehensive local government consulting firm with a particular focus on serving Southern California communities in emergency management and planning. Next to me is Raymond Chung, Director of Emergency Management. Raymond is an International Association of Emergency Managers Certified Emergency Manager. It's a long one. And has 20 years of experience working in municipality and emergency management, all for Southern California cities and counties. And we have also Patrick Marshman, project manager of this plan, who will be on Zoom this evening. Thank you for joining us, Patrick. I know it's midnight over there, so thank you. Patrick has over 20 years of experience in environmental, climate adaptation, and hazard mitigation planning. Also worked for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, as a hazard mitigation planner. So we are here this evening just to update you all tonight on the development of the actual plan. And the actual plan is intended to serve as a guide for community to reduce adverse impact from natural and human-caused hazards. So in our presentation, we will explain what this plan is about, the purpose of this plan, and why it's so important for the city to stay in compliance every 5 years. Patrick, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Oh, perfect. The floor is yours.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for your time. I'll try to be efficient with my comments. This is meant to be an introduction to the status of the plan. I'll start out with a discussion, and my colleague Ray will take over later on in the presentation. So next slide, please. Next slide. Great. So what is hazard mitigation planning? So hazard mitigation planning, or as it is known in most of the rest of the world by the slightly more descriptive name disaster risk reduction, is intended to reduce the loss of life and property by minimizing the impact of disasters. These are generally larger scale events, usually from natural hazards, floods, fires, earthquakes, can also be from non-natural causes as well. It begins with state, tribal, and local governments identifying disaster risks and vulnerabilities that are common in their individual areas. These plans are never one size fits all. They can be informed by what happens in neighboring communities, but they're intended to be really focused on the jurisdiction for which they are developed. So what is the purpose of the plan? So first bullet point is access to FEMA funding programs. So this is important. FEMA has several large pots of money. You may have heard of some of them: the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program, the BRIC program. To access these programs, a jurisdiction must have an approved hazard mitigation plan in effect in the adoption process. And also an action being applied for the funding needs to be mentioned in an approved hazard mitigation plan in the mitigation options section. Also, another purpose of this is to increase education and awareness on natural hazards and community vulnerabilities. It's not meant to just be a plan, but it's meant to, again, sort of build community awareness so the community can effectively react and respond. To build partnerships with organizations, businesses, and the public. Ideally, plans go beyond simply a government exercise and try to build relationships to the various parts of the community. And finally, to identify long-term strategies for risk reduction with input from stakeholders and the public. So as I mentioned before, plans must be updated every 5 years to remain current and for cities to retain eligibility for the FEMA funding programs I just mentioned. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just a quick overview of West Hollywood's LHMP history. The first LHMP for West Hollywood was written in 2004, shortly after the passing of the Stafford Act, the Disaster Management Act of 2000. There were updates in 2010, 2015, 2018. The current plan is expiring this month, November 2023. Each LHMP update included steady improvements in depth and detail, especially in the descriptions of hazards and of actions to reduce their impacts. This just should be expected, as time goes on from the first plan where nobody really knew what was going to go into one of these plans. The city was very effective in sort of building on each additional iteration of the plan. The firm I'm working with, Jacob Green & Associates, was retained in February 2023 to do a new update of the plan, do a sort of thorough revision. And one of the reasons is because there have been a lot of events in the world in the past few years, and also FEMA policy updates. We're all aware of COVID-19, of lots of issues socially and environmentally as well. And FEMA has also, in response to this, promulgated new local mitigation planning guidance. So this new policy guide was effective April 19th of 2023 this year. So the new guide has a heavy emphasis on climate impacts and adaptation. All plans must take into account climate change and what to do about it. They're also looking for more of a treatment in equity and a look at disadvantaged populations as well. And one other thing that we're doing is looking more into human-caused hazards as well. That's something we heard loud and clear in our interviews throughout the city government, that there was a lot of concern about certain events, and we also looked at sort of second-order events from extreme heat and such as power outages, which by themselves, the severity of them raised them up to the status of a sort of a standalone hazard to be examined. So Ray, do you want to take the next few slides?
Yes, thank you, Patrick. So good evening, Chair Hallman, Vice Chair Saltzman, Honorable Commissioners. This slide is discussing, or goes into more detail, the development process that we've gone through over the past 8 months or so. I do want to take a moment to commend the Community Safety Department, Director Rivas, Ms. Kostanovich. FEMA does not have an overly prescriptive process for how they want the plan development process to work. But Director Rivas and Ms. Kostanovich did direct us to ensure that a very comprehensive, very robust process, including very thorough community input, was undergone for this plan update for the City of West Hollywood. So this details some of that. We started in the spring with city departments as well as external agencies really looking at a holistic view of the hazards that may affect the city. We then went into a meeting in May looking at what we call the hazard vulnerability assessment process that goes into much more detail on individual hazards and the risk associated with them, especially looking at the severity, frequency of those disasters, especially looking at climate change and drought and heat emergencies and things like that, how they may increase into the future is very, very important. So we received input from the city departments on that for prioritization of those hazards. Then we went out to the public to get more community feedback. The plan's only as good as the input that we receive. So this part is very, very important for us as well as for the city. So we did community outreach meetings at the ARC. That was an in-person meeting paired with surveys for all the attendees of that meeting. That was both for quantitative as well as qualitative purposes to receive feedback. We also did a virtual meeting in July, basically for the same purpose as the in-person, just to capture more feedback from the public who weren't able to attend in person. This August, we finished the comments, taking in all the input from city staff and the public, submitted that to the city for review. I just did some additional few drafts to ensure all that feedback was incorporated, and we submitted the low cost mitigation plan to Cal OES for review in late September. And here we are today presenting to this body for additional comments and recommendation to the City Council next week for plan approval. Next slide, please. And this is just a brief slide that talks about the different engagement events we held throughout the year, how many people attended, and the number of comments we received back. Generally speaking, hazard mitigation plan public meetings are not the most exciting meetings. So, the city definitely put a lot of emphasis on getting the word out there to get folks to come over. And this is actually definitely one of the better attended meetings, public meetings, and public feedback that we typically receive. So, a great job to the city staff for getting us there. Through the two public meetings, we had 15 attendees for the in-person, 7 virtual. We also did a survey out to the public via the city website, as well as when we did it during the public meeting. So we received a total of 30 responses to that survey. And we also posted the draft plan on the city website for review and for public comments as well for a 2-week period in September. And we received 3 additional comments from that comment period, which were incorporated into the plan. And I'll turn it back to Ms. Kustanovich.
Thank you, Ray and Patrick. So in conclusion, pretty much we'd like to mention it, the hazard mitigation plan provide an opportunity to access funding for specified action to mitigation hazard identified in that plan, which include wildfire, earthquake, extreme heat and rainfall, flooding, high wind, drought, terrorism, hazard material incidents. So for us to remain approved, plans must be updated every 5 years. And the purpose of public meetings, surveys, community outreach was to allow community members to provide input to the city's hazard mitigation plan, and also ensuring that the public input and experiences are included in the final draft. So thank you all for having us. We're open for any questions, recommendations.
Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Blau.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, questions? No. But thank you.
All right, Commissioner Freiberg.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I just have a quick question. So if we need to evacuate, let's say for a fire, how do I know where to go? How do our residents know where to go? Especially if they have mobility issues.
For all evacuation, we actually have an emergency response plan that's currently on the city's website, and that's a separate project from the hazard mitigation one. But I'm happy to share we're actually working on the emergency response plan currently, and Chair Hallman was part of that project with me. So hopefully we'll have that out for you as well soon.
Yeah, because I mean, if a fire happens right now, everyone's going to go to the website and try to figure out what to do. They're going to want to know maybe ahead of time. So it's about how to communicate to the residents, what to do in case of emergency. I mean, is there a plan for that?
Yeah, that would be the place to look into, but I can definitely provide something on the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? Commission Secretary, do we have any questions? Oh, there you are. Sorry about that. Commissioner Nickel.
Thank you, Chair Hallman. Thank you so much for your presentation. And the public meetings you did. I remember that we attended one way back in June, I believe. Actually, I had that same question about awareness and also for disabled residents and older adults. in case of emergency, for them, for the most vulnerable residents, is there something provided to, as far as transportation, by the city to help people get out of the city if they were to need to, or to get to safety?
I can definitely look into that.
Okay, thank you. One thing that keeps coming up, cyber attacks are a big concern for me. But one of the things that, as far as an earthquake or any of these major things, is the need to have power. You mentioned at some point that even the people helping to run the city after a disaster, that how much time are they going to have charged on their phones and things? How many generators? At some point in the 122 pages, you do mention that there is a generator, but you seem to say that the city doesn't have that many. Are there plans for the city to have more? And is it possible to have solar generators, which are better for the environment? And you also mentioned that we have an abundance of sun.
We do actually have generators as backup. And I will definitely look into the solar one. That's
Great.
a great suggestion.
And as far as stockpiling, do we stockpile PPE? I mean, we all remember the scramble when suddenly the world even needed to learn what that means. Does the city now, looking forward to another potential pandemic, are we stockpiling things like this?
Do you want to respond to the last question?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to add on your previous question, Commissioner Nickel, that in the back of the plan, in the mitigation strategy section, there are a lot of projects that have to do with generators and battery backup and a concept called resiliency centers for residents to come in and charge their devices. So, even if there are certain resources that the city does not yet have, this plan is a vehicle to potentially get funding for those. And there's over 120 different little projects like that within the plan, and the city can, within their annual update, could always add additional as well.
Great. Something like this does force you to consider the worst and then work backwards. So that's really good. Another thing that you mentioned in here is the possibility of, with all of the new construction and the development, doing something to encourage those developers to add in backup generators, and of course add green spaces to roofs and for people to have, because it cools. If suddenly you have no electricity and there's a heat wave, it's good to have trees around because they're cooling. So I think those were the main things that I had questions about. It was a lot of work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any additional questions? Commission Secretary, do we have a comment in chambers on this item?
Yes, we do. Kevin Burton, if you
Great,
want to
thank you.
approach the podium.
Good evening again. I'm Kevin Burton, resident of West Hollywood and co-founder of WeHo Research. CERT refers to Community Emergency Response Team, and this is training offered by the County Fire Department most every year with the exception of the pandemic, and we are all trainees, and most of us multiple time trainees in emergency response to assist our neighbors and our family should that be necessary prior to the arrival of emergency services. And I want to thank staff for a very comprehensive plan. It's well written, and they've been very responsive to public comment and adding to the list of little projects that was referred to at the end of the report. That is appreciated very much. And I just wanted to comment too, I love Commissioner Nichols' suggestion of solar generators, because what's going to happen is something like an earthquake. You're not going to have fuel deliveries. You won't have power at gas stations. You won't get fuel for your generators. You should definitely have solar generators. So that's superb, I think. I just wanted to comment on 3 categories, and I'm paying attention to the timer this time. One is transportation. Again, if it's a big earthquake, the roads will be blocked. You won't get fuel in. If you have a vehicle, you won't be able to drive in many areas. What are you or the emergency services going to do? And there should be plans. And initially, the initial drafts didn't say anything about transportation. Now, and this is a good response to my suggestion, is that if you look at responses to disasters around the world, what do you see in blocked roads? No fuel. People are on bikes with big bags on the bikes, with backpacks, emergency services. And I would strongly advise the fire department, unfortunately, they left. I don't think they have any alternative plan. I think they're totally unprepared if that happens. I know the sheriff's department has a bike team. I think you have some bikes at the station. So if you could not drive your cruisers, what are you going to do? You can use the bikes. At least you'll have something. You can lift the bike up over debris. So I think that's very important to emphasize in this plan. Secondly, extreme heat. A lot of rentals have no air conditioning. The landlords won't allow air conditioning to be installed. There's no insulation in the upper floors, and that's a very serious matter, and that should be required, is the insulation. And I think those are my suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no additional questions from the commission, thank you. I personally know how hard you work on these plans, and I know how taxing they are, so we appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Item 9, item from staff. Are there any updates from staff this evening?
Yes, thank you, Chair and Vice Chair and members of the Public Safety Commission. Danny Rivas, Director of Community Safety for the city. Keep it very brief. I know our fire department partners had to leave, but I know our West Hollywood Sheriff Station representatives and block by block representative are still here. And so I just wanted to echo the sentiment of the commission and thank them as well for all of their collective efforts and hard work during Halloween. As been reported, it was a very successful event. We also had our city code enforcement team and a number of other divisions and departments that worked collaboratively together to make the event what it was. And so there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, but from a public safety perspective and from all fronts, not taking away or discounting anybody's hard work because there was a lot that went into it. But from a public safety perspective, it certainly went extremely well, and we heard a lot of positive input and feedback, very minimal incidents that did occur from a law enforcement perspective. And yes, there were calls to the fire department, but again, it was very manageable. And so, you know, we look forward to next year. But before next Halloween, of course, we have Pride, and I know that that is going to start beginning in terms of the planning phase regarding that, which will be right around the corner. I do also want to make mention that, you know, with the holiday season that we're in and, you know, with festivities and whatnot just around the corner, our West Hollywood Sheriff Station is also implementing an increased presence. And so we are communicating. There is a holiday plan, if you will, that is going to be incorporated as it relates to adding some additional patrols, foot patrols, but units as well out and about in our most visited areas just to provide a heightened level of presence, as well as from our block-by-block team as well. And so I wanted to make mention of that. I also wanted to touch on, I know there were a number of questions regarding vacant properties. And so in the interim, in between items, I did communicate with our neighborhood and business safety manager that oversees our code enforcement department, did make mention of all the vacant properties that were referenced today, as well as the construction site. And all of those properties are going to be followed up on, and I'll be provided with some updates and background. I am familiar with the 1280 Sweetser property, as one of the members of the community had mentioned. That is an ongoing case that is currently in litigation. It is going through what's called a receivership, and so that's a heightened level of action, civil action, that the city is actually taking, and so it has been in the courts for quite some time. But anytime that there are calls for service, there is a quick response. That is a priority call. I know the teams are also doing as much as they can in terms of doing spot checks, as well as our code enforcement staff. And so hopefully we're going to get some resolution quickly as it relates to that, as things have progressed for us in the court system. I can't get into detail, but I just wanted to make mention that there are obviously some of the properties referenced that have to go through a process, but we are certainly aware of them. And then lastly, I just wanted to make mention, as I was going on the website in terms of complaints and accommodations, et cetera. And so I just wanted to walk through the commission and members of the public as well in terms of how to access this information. I did not see a recent quarterly report yet that's been released, but it looks like at least half of the year broken down into quarter reports has been provided. And so just give me a second here, and I want to share the screen. And so I'm just going to kind of go back to doing, not that one. Let me go back in the screen here. I wanted to take everybody back until how I got to where I got. And let's see if this will do it. Yes. So you can see I just typed in the Google search engine on the internet, LASD Civilian Oversight Commission. It's, pulling up their specific website for the county of Los Angeles. So I'm clicking on that. And now I am just going to scroll down. And as I'm on the Civilian Oversight Commission's webpage, home webpage, I just scrolled just a tad, and you can see it says file accommodation or a complaint. So I'm just going to click on that. And up right, we have publications. So I'm clicking on that. And now this is taking me to Sheriff's Department, Probation Department. We're interested in the Sheriff's Department. So here I am clicking on this. And then you have quarterly reports, all reports. So I just clicked on quarterly reports. And here is where you're seeing those quarterly reports that I was just mentioning. So you have January to March of this year, and you have the most current that they have reflected right now is April to June. So I do not see July through September that's been released yet. But as soon as that does, then we'll make sure to provide that to the commission. I know that was a number of clicks. And so what we'll look at doing is kind of copying and pasting, right, this hyperlink up on top, and seeing if there's somewhere on our webpage, on the city's webpage, under our Sheriff's Department kind of subpage, that we could apply that and make it very easy, right, for folks to kind of click on that, and it would take them to these reports, and then also the link to where folks can provide accommodation and or complaint. So I just wanted to walk the commission through that, and members of the public, and with that, that concludes my comments.
Great, thank you, Director Rivas. Commission Secretary, do we have any additional public comments?
No additional public comments at this time.
Great, thank you. Commissioner comments or items from commissioners. Does anyone have anything? All right, Commissioner Ramian.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to say we finished our Sheriff's Department Community Academy. I cannot say what a great experience that was. I highly encourage everyone who hadn't had an opportunity to take that to sign up for it when it comes around next year. You learn so much about the ins and outs of our Sheriff's Department, and it's a great learning experience for, I think, everyone. Halloween, great Halloween. It was great to see Halloween back in West Hollywood again, seeing the streets full, the businesses busy. I want to thank the Sheriff's Department again, block by block, and the Fire Department for keeping us safe during that time. This was also, I believe, a very special Halloween for West Hollywood because it was the very first time that we had a cannabis event here, I believe, in West Hollywood, correct? So that was the nation's first. And I hear it was a great success with 0 incidents. So hopefully that'll return next year as well. And it's the holiday season, so I want to wish everyone here a happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays in the upcoming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ramian. Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Nickel?
Thank you, Chair. I graduated also from the West Hollywood Community Police Academy. Thanks again for all the speakers and the teachers. It was a really great experience. I completed the American Red Cross CPR and First Aid and AED course. And I did a walk-along with Captain Wendy Goldman of the Cynthia Sunset Northwest Watch Group. And I want all of the watch groups and residential associations to know that I am absolutely available to attend any of their meetings or to do a walkabout around their community to see the issues that they're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nichols. Vice Chair Saltzman.
Thank you. Just two things. I continue to be on the advisory board of this new organization, the acronym for which is LA COPS. It's a new organization designed to provide assistance to LGBTQ employees of the Sheriff's Department, the LAPD, and all the other law enforcement agencies in LA County. And they are now have existing and beginning to produce materials and workshops. I also serving on the Sheriff's LGBTQ Advisory Task Force, and currently the focus is on issues in the jails, and the task force is going to visit the jails. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other commissioner comments? Then I will be brief. I also attended the Sheriff's Academy. Thank you to our Sheriff's Department. I thought it was well executed. I especially enjoyed watching our canine units perform, the drug sniffing dog, as well as the bomb sniffing dog. They work very hard, and it was fascinating watching that. And in reference to what we do here in the city, Halloween and Pride, these are large-scale activations. And, you know, when they say it takes a village, it takes more than a village to pull these off successfully as well as safely. So I would like to once again acknowledge our Sheriff's Department, code compliance, and they're out walking the streets during these events, as well as block by block, and staff. Everyone works very hard so we can have a great time and enjoy these different activations. So your efforts are greatly appreciated, and thank you. If there is nothing else, it's 9:30. This is one of our longer meetings, but get used to it. They're going to be basically this time. Now that we're a fully seated body, we're going to be getting into more important things that we need to focus on as a commission. So with that being said, we are adjourned until December 11th at 6 p.m. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone, and be safe.